let the last stray sounds of your room settle, as if each one is politely stepping aside. A quiet invitation hangs in the air, to loosen your shoulders, to soften your breath, to close the curtain on whatever the day demanded. You blink once, slowly, and the darkness seems to fold itself around you like a well-worn cloak. When you open your eyes again, you are sitting on a weathered stone step you don't remember walking to. A chilled mist brushes your cheeks. Behind you, a tall warehouse wall hums with the sleepy silence of pre-dawn. Before you, the faint silhouettes of masts rise like a forest of patient giants. You have arrived at a medieval port city, though arrived is too strong a word. You have simply drifted here, the way foam drifts to the edge of a tide. There is a quiet consolation in this. No one has noticed you yet, and a gentle complication. The city will, sooner or later. A cold grain of sea salt clings to your lips. The stone beneath you still holds the memory of night, cool, slightly damp, smelling faintly of moss and old fish. From somewhere beyond the piers comes the soft, rhythmic slosh of water nudging the hulls, like the sea clearing its throat. A rope creaks, mutters, settles again. You taste wood smoke drifting from a bakery that must be beginning its long morning vigil. There is the ghost of tar in the air, the hint of wool grease from cloaks brushed past you earlier, and the warm undercurrent of yeast rising in dough. Everything here wakes slowly, in layers, including you, and this is only the first breath before dawn. You stand, eventually, when your legs begin to feel too aware of the stone. The mist is thin, more like breath than fog, and it wraps around your ankles as you walk. To your left, the quay stretches in a long, uneven line of stone blocks, each one polished by centuries of boots, hooves, and the occasional unfortunate fall. To your right, narrow lanes climb up toward the rest of the city, a tangle of roofs and chimneys, still mostly asleep. Your lodging is somewhere up there, on one of those streets that is neither important enough for a name everyone remembers, nor quiet enough to forget. You begin the slow climb. The city rises in terraces, stacked like shelves above the harbor. The lowest shelf belongs, unmistakably, to the sea. Warehouses, taverns, rope walks, small shrines tucked into corners for nervous sailors. Higher up, homes lean against one another as if whispering secrets through their shared walls. As you walk, the stones under your feet change. Near the water, they are slick, dark, smelling of brine and spilled wine. A little higher, they grow drier, dustier, marked with wagon ruts and the faint scar of cartwheels. A cat slips past you, tail held like a question mark, its fur brushed with flour from some careless kitchen doorway. Someone dumps a bucket of gray water into the gutter ahead of you. It snakes along the edge of the street, carrying the faint smell of soap, onion, and yesterday. You reach your doorway, a low, wooden frame swollen slightly from the damp. The latch is simple, a loop of iron that has seen more hands than you can count. Inside, the stair is narrow, spiraling up behind the front room where the landlord and his family sleep. You move carefully in the half-dark, one hand on the wall. The plaster is rough beneath your fingers, cool, and you can feel where someone's shoulder has worn a soft groove into it over the years. Your little room under the eaves is nothing special, which is exactly its charm. A plank bed against one wall, filled with straw that rustles when you sit on it. A wool blanket, a little scratchy, smelling of lanolin and smoke. A small chest for your few things. One window with a warped frame and wavy glass that makes the outside world ripple like water. You open the shutter halfway, and the sound of the harbor slips in, the soft slap of tide, the faint voices of early risers, the clink of something metal being moved before the city has agreed to be fully awake. You splash your face with water from the basin. It is cool, but not icy, carrying a faint metallic taste at the edge of the air. Water is never entirely simple here. Somewhere uphill, someone drew it from a cistern or well, lifting it in clean, deliberate motions. Somewhere, in another part of town, a different cistern sits lower than it should, sometimes full, sometimes stubbornly empty. In a port city, you might think the sea solves every water problem. The sea disagrees in its quietly salty way. You dry your hands on a linen cloth, stiff from drying near the fire too many times. The air in your room holds the remains of the night. Coolness from the walls, a trace of old smoke from the hearth downstairs, and the sweet, faintly sour note of wood that has known too many damp winters. It is not a luxurious life, but it is a life with edges you can feel. The scratch of fabric, the weight of the blanket, the grain of the floorboards under your bare feet. And it is still not really morning. You dress in layers made for a world that does not trust the weather. A simple shirt, the cloth not quite smooth, with tiny irregularities from the loom. A tunic over it, the wool dense and reassuring, carrying hints of smoke and the faint tang of sweat that never entirely washes out. Your belt creaks as you pull it tight, old leather, well used, cracked at the holes. Your shoes are sturdy rather than elegant, their soles worn thin at the ball of the foot from hills and steps like the ones you just climbed. Downstairs, the landlord's wife is already awake. You smell her before you see her. Hot bread, strong onions, and something fried in fat. Her movements make a quiet choreography in the small room. A pan lifted, a jug moved, a spoon tapping lightly against a bowl. She nods at you, a greeting that belongs more to habit than to enthusiasm, and jerks her chin toward the table. Breakfast in a medieval port city is not a feast, unless you are very rich or very lucky. For you, it is a piece of coarse bread, the crust hard enough to make you work for it. You tear it with your hands, the crumbs falling onto the table like small beige pebbles. There is a smear of soft cheese, a little sour, salted enough to make you aware of your tongue. A small onion, sharp and fresh, bites back when you bite into it. And there is thin ale, barely stronger than water, with a yeasty smell and a faint bitterness that wakes you more gently than any modern drink would. You chew, you swallow, and as you do, you taste the port itself. Grain that came from inland fields by cart, salt that arrived by ship, the labor of millers and brewers and coopers all tangled together in that simple, stubborn bit of bread and ale. It is not romantic, but it is honest. From the street outside, you hear the city clear its throat a little louder. A cart rattles over the stones, its wheels complaining. A dog barks twice, then decides this is not yet its business. A gull screams in the distance, offended by something only gulls understand. The landlord's youngest child toddles out from a corner, hair sticking out in every direction, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Life here does not wait for you to be ready. Simply continues, and you do your best to keep up. And the sun is still only a suggestion behind the clouds. You step out into the morning properly now. The mist has begun to lift, but the air is still cool enough to make your breath visible in short, pale puffs. The sky over the harbor is a dim, washed-out gray, with a faint line of silver where the sun is debating whether to join the day. Down on the quay, lanterns still burn here and there, small yellow islands in the fading gloom. You walk downhill again, your feet already knowing the path. A woman passes you, carrying a basket of fish wrapped in damp cloth. The smell reaches you before she does. Sharp, clean, and unapologetic. Another figure carries a bundle of firewood, the twigs clicking together softly. A boy runs by with a bucket, nearly sloshing it over your shoes, his bare feet slapping against the stones. Near the water, the sounds grow denser. Men call to one another in short, practical phrases, their voices already hoarse from use. Ropes are hauled, pulleys squeal softly, wood creaks. Someone laughs. Someone curses mildly when a crate does not go where it should. The sea itself provides a constant undertone. The lap of waves against hulls, the soft gurgle of water retreating from the stones, the occasional hollow knock of a loose plank bumping against a ship's side. You pause a moment at the edge of the quay. Up close, the water looks darker than it did from your window, almost black, with streaks of green where the light catches it. It moves in slow, muscular folds, never fully still. The smell is stronger here. Salt and algae, tar and damp wood, and the faint, persistent note of things that died long enough ago to be uninteresting, but not long enough to be entirely forgotten. This city lives because ships come and go. Wheat, wine, salt, wool, timber, spices, oil, sometimes people. Everything moves by water first. The sea can be generous when it chooses, can also change its mind without warning. For now, it is in a soft mood, breathing calmly, almost soothingly. And still, the day has barely scratched its way into being. You turn your attention to the people around you. Life in a medieval port city is written on their clothes, their hands, their posture. The dockworkers move with the careful strength of people who know exactly how much a crate or barrel weighs before they touch it. Their hands are calloused, nails short, knuckles thickened. Their tunics are stained with things that do not entirely wash out: tar, fish, wine, sweat. Further along, you see a scribe's apprentice, thin and a little bewildered, carrying a bundle of documents wrapped in cloth to keep off the damp. Their fingers are ink-stained, their shoes much cleaner than the dockworkers, and their eyes wider, as if the harbor is something they have only ever met on paper. A merchant in a cloak of better wool than yours stands slightly apart, watching a cargo being unloaded with the anxious precision of someone who has invested more than he can comfortably afford. Even the way people speak marks where they fit. Dockhands call each other by short names, half-shouted. Merchants speak more slowly, with words chosen like coins. The tavern keepers' voices slide easily between the two, polite to those with coin, sharp as needed with those who only have promises. You, for now, exist somewhere in the middle, neither especially important nor entirely invisible. There is a kind of etiquette here that has nothing to do with bowing or titles. You learn quickly where not to stand if you want to keep your toes. You learn not to interrupt when sacks of grain are being counted, or when a captain is speaking quietly with the harbor master. You know that there are topics not discussed loudly on the quay: unpaid debts, poor quality goods, and anything to do with storms. The sea hears, people say, and it has opinions. And despite all this quiet choreography, the morning is still shaking the sleep from its eyes. You wander a little inland from the wet edge of the port, into a lane lined with small workshops. This is where the city's heartbeat changes tempo. Ropes are twisted and coiled, thick and rough under calloused hands. Nets are spread out like pale, tangled spiderwebs, being mended by fingers that move faster than you can follow. A cooper hums to himself as he shapes a barrel, every strike of his tool sending a small, sharp note into the air. The smell here is different from the quay. Less salt, more wood and fiber. Sawdust hangs in the air like a faint golden fog. Hemp and flax give off their own stubborn scents, slightly grassy, slightly sour. There is the occasional bitter whiff of pitch being heated, sticky and dark. Your throat feels it when you breathe too deeply, so you learn not to. This is the part of port life visitors often do not imagine. They picture glittering ships and brave sailors, perhaps a tavern brawl or two, and forget that someone had to make every barrel, mend every sail, stitch every bag. The romance of the sea rests on very unromantic hands that are tired, sore, and often underpaid. Still, there is a quiet pride here in things made well and used hard. And all of this, and it is still only morning. You begin to notice the rhythm beneath the noise, like a slow drum. The tide rises and falls, drawing ships closer, then further. The city's people rise and fall with it. Early preparations, mid-morning rush, the brief lull before midday. In a few hours, the streets will be busier, smells stronger, tempers shorter. For now, the day is stretching, testing its limbs. You run your hand lightly along a stack of coiled rope. It is rough, fibers catching at your skin, leaving a faint, itchy trail. Your fingertips smell faintly of hemp afterwards. A stray splinter from a nearby plank pricks your palm. You pull it out, a tiny sting reminding you that even the quiet moments here have edges. Life in a medieval port city is like that, not sharp enough to cut you in every second, but never truly soft. Even on a calm, cool morning like this, you feel the weight of work waiting, the silent pressure of ships that must be loaded, unloaded, repaired, sent out again. Somewhere, deeper in the city, the wealth that all this labor creates is counting itself, comfortably. Here, on the edges, people are counting something else. Hours, steps, sacks, breaths. And the day has only just begun to keep score. You leave the workshop lane behind, stepping into a quieter corner where the smell of the sea thins and the scent of everyday life takes its place. A baker's doorway stands partly open, the heat rolling out in soft waves. You pause, not because you mean to buy anything, you already had your morning bread, but because warmth is its own kind of invitation. A soft crackle reaches your ears. Inside, loaves rise in neat rows like small, patient hills. One of the apprentices wipes flour from their brow, leaving a pale streak across a tired cheek. They give you the kind of nod people reserve for familiar strangers. Not quite kindness, not quite indifference. You nod back, as if this exchange matters more than it does. The alley behind the bakery leads into a broader street, one that is beginning to gather the hum of living voices. A pair of women carrying baskets of herbs walk together, their soft conversation peppered with laughter that rises and falls like sparrows startled from a roof. A man with a lute slung over his back stumbles sleepily out of a doorway, still rubbing at his eyes, as though the night's music clung to him longer than he intended. A washerwoman empties a bucket into the gutter. The water runs down the stones, carrying the crisp scent of soap and lavender. The sun has finally decided to participate. Not fully, that would be too bold, but just enough to brighten the tops of the roofs with a reluctant, lemon-colored glow. The rising warmth touches your face, light and nearly shy. You blink into it, letting it soften the last remnants of night inside you. And still, it is only mid-morning. You drift toward the upper market, where the city tilts slightly toward the hill. Here, the ground is drier, the houses cleaner, the people marginally more concerned with the state of their shoes. Not much more, but enough to notice. The street widens into a marketplace paved in flat stones of different shapes, as though the city had never agreed on a single design. Stalls are being opened one by one, each revealing a small world hidden behind cloth or wood. A fishmonger's table appears first. Fresh catches lie on beds of crushed ice, their scales glistening silver or red. You feel a faint sting in your nose, the sharp, oceanic smell that announces itself long before you get close. The fishmonger chants his morning greeting, a rhythmic sound more like a prayer than salesmanship. Customers hover at a polite distance until he finishes, for reasons no one can quite explain. Next to him, a merchant unfolds bolts of dyed cloth. Blues and greens, muted but unmistakable, ripple in the breeze. You touch one corner as you pass. The fabric is coarse, though finer than anything you own, and carries a faint scent of the oil used to keep moths away. The merchant watches you with a raised brow, not suspicious, not friendly, simply calculating. You step away before he decides how much he thinks you can afford. Farther in, an older woman sells pottery. Bowls with uneven rims, jugs with small decorative dents, plates whose glazes shine in tiny galaxies of blue and white. Her hands are dusted with clay despite the early hour, and her eyes have that steady warmth of someone who has learned patience from the earth itself. You pick up a cup, smooth and cool, feeling the faint swirl of the potter's fingers embedded in its shape. She smiles without speaking. You return the cup gently. She nods, approving your care. The smell of cooking rises like a soft banner over all of it. Someone fries strips of dough in hot oil, the scent warm and slightly sweet. Another grinds spices with a stone mortar, releasing bursts of aroma that swirl above the market. Pepper, coriander, something smoky you cannot name. A man roasting nuts over a small brazier fans the embers with slow, practiced motions, each one releasing a toasty, comforting cloud. A child runs by with a piece of fruit, laughing in the way only children running with forbidden fruit can laugh. Behind them, an exasperated older brother chases half-heartedly, already resigned. You step aside to let them pass, and the child gives you a triumphant grin before disappearing behind a cart of onions. The older brother sighs in your direction, as though apologizing for the very concept of siblings. Your stomach rumbles. Perhaps you should have brought the bread with you. Perhaps the smell of roasted nuts is too persuasive. Perhaps the city knows how to nudge you with scent and sound until you agree to stay just a little longer, eat just a little more, walk just one more street. And now, though the morning has advanced, it is still not yet midday. You purchase a small pastry, hot from the pan, folded over a filling of herbs and soft cheese. The crust flakes against your fingers, warm and crisp, and steam escapes in a gentle sigh as you take the first bite. The herbs taste fresh, sharp, green. The cheese melts into a smooth whisper of salt. You close your eyes briefly, savoring the moment. The vendor, a man with a kind face and flour dusted all the way up his sleeves, smiles when he sees your reaction. A simple transaction, but it feels strangely like a shared secret. You sit on the low edge of a fountain to finish eating. The water trickles down stone lions' mouths, each stream making a music of uneven droplets. Children dip their hands into the basin, giggling at the cold shock. A dog laps at the water until a merchant shoos it away, though without much conviction. The dog trots off, shaking its wet muzzle indignantly. The sun is higher now. It has pushed aside the thin morning haze and begun warming the stones under your feet. Shadows shrink. The city breathes in deeper rhythms. Somewhere, a bell rings, one long, low toll. Not the church bell, not the guild bell. This is the harbor bell. You hear the shift in the city instantly. Heads turn, steps quicken, voices sharpen. A ship is arriving. Not an unusual event. This is a port, after all. But each ship carries with it possibilities. Goods, letters, rumors, fortunes, disappointments. You rise from the fountain, brushing crumbs from your tunic, and follow the invisible pullback downhill. The market continues behind you, voices fading into a soft blur. As you descend, the smells change again. Spices, flour, and sweet dough give way to tar, brine, and sweat. You feel the humidity thicken, clinging to your clothes. The air tastes of salt before you see the water. The masts reappear, rising like familiar, weather-beaten trees. The harbor crowds gather as you approach. Not a throng, exactly, but a purposeful clustering of bodies, leaning forward as though proximity might let them see the horizon more clearly. The ship appears slowly, emerging from a patch of light where the sun touches the faint mist. Its sails are half-furled, catching the breeze with lazy confidence. The hull is dark, burnished by travel. You hear the distant call of the lookout, his voice carried unevenly over the water. Even from here, you sense the weary pride in the ship's return, the way it cuts through the water with the gait of something long tested and not yet defeated. Dockworkers prepare ropes. Children climb atop crates for a better view. A merchant's clerk begins flipping through a ledger with the anxiety of someone who knows a miscount today means trouble tomorrow. A group of sailors waiting for friends stand in a loose semicircle, their expressions schooled into nonchalance so complete it becomes comical. You watch as the ship glides toward its berth, its motion deceptively slow, like a massive creature returning to its den. The water curls away from its bow in gentle waves. The gulls circle overhead, hopeful and unashamed. When the hull finally kisses the quay with a soft thump, the sound resonates through the stones beneath your feet. Voices erupt, greetings, orders, curses that are more affectionate than hostile. The gangplank is lowered. People begin to cross. Sailors with tired eyes, a few passengers clutching travel bundles, one man carrying a crate as though it were a sleeping pet. The dockworkers begin unloading, muscles flexing under worn shirts, breath synchronizing with each lift. And in all this movement you notice something, a small detail. A boy, no older than 10, rushes forward and throws his arms around one of the sailors. The sailor kneels, laughing, lifting the boy into a brief, solid embrace. Their joy is unvarnished, without performance. It is the kind of everyday tenderness that happens quickly, unnoticed by most, but it roots itself quietly in your memory. Still, the day is only edging toward noon. You step aside as a group of sailors passes you, their boots leaving wet prints on the stone. Their tunics smell of sea and rope, their hair stiffened with salt. One hums a tune under his breath, a quiet, wavering melody that speaks of long nights and longer waits. Another carries a pouch of dried fruit, eating one piece at a time with exaggerated slowness. They weave past you and disappear into a tavern whose door swings like a sigh behind them. You walk along the quay, letting the gentle chaos surround you but not claim you. The sea, now fully awake, sparkles in uneven patches, as if light were being scattered by an unseen hand. The ropes creak in low, familiar tones. A nearby barrel leaks water in thin drips, forming a small puddle that mirrors the sky in its wobbling surface. You stop near a stack of cargo, sacks of grain, marked with symbols you don't recognize. Wine barrels sealed with dark red wax, crates lined with straw, humming faintly with the promise of goods. A clerk approaches, his quill tucked behind one ear. He compares markings on a crate to a list in his hand, frowning with the type of seriousness reserved for numbers and the people who trust them. You watch him work for a moment, appreciating the quiet gravity of his task. In a place where so much depends on movement, someone must keep track of what arrives and departs. The sun climbs higher. Heat begins to gather on your shoulders. The stones radiate warmth through the soles of your shoes. A faint sweat forms along your neck. The harbor, earlier cool and misty, now feels heavier, fuller. The tide inches upward, each small rise catching the sunlight in a new, more brilliant angle. And although the morning has shed its softness, there is still a long day ahead. In the midst of everything, you feel a strange, gentle awareness. The rhythm of this city is weaving itself into you, not quickly, not dramatically, but quietly, like thread pulled through cloth. You have felt the cool dawn, the stirrings of work, the scent of food, the arrival of a ship, the warmth of the rising sun. You begin to understand why people stay, even when the sea is unpredictable, even when the work is endless. There is something steady here, not safety but familiarity. A place where each day follows the tide with small variations, enough to keep the city alive, but never enough to startle it. And though it is almost noon, you sense that the day is just beginning to reveal its true shape. The sun leans higher still, and with it the harbor shrugs off the last of its morning gentleness. The sounds grow firmer, brighter, more insistent. A hammer rings somewhere behind a warehouse, each strike echoing off stone like a heartbeat too eager to be subtle. A sailor argues half-heartedly with a trader about the price of olives, then gives up with a shrug that suggests olives were never really the point. A gull steals a crust of bread from a distracted dockhand, then announces its triumph to the entire shoreline, as gulls are prone to do. Your stomach reminds you that morning was some time ago. The pastry has warmed you, but not filled you. People begin drifting toward food stalls and taverns, not in a rush, but in a slow, familiar migration, as though the city itself is nudging them forward with a gentle hand at their backs. You follow without thinking, letting the flow of bodies guide you into the narrow street that curves away from the quay. This lane is different from the upper market. The houses tilt inward, their roofs nearly meeting overhead like gossiping neighbors. The air grows denser with scent. Frying fish, warm bread, the smoky perfume of roasting beans, and somewhere, faint but persistent, the earthy tang of fermented cabbage. Voices drift from open windows. A woman hums while chopping vegetables. Someone laughs, a deep, throaty sound rising like warm air from a chimney. You stop at a modest tavern with a sign depicting a fish so cheerfully round that you suspect the painter never met a real fish. The door stands open, the interior dim and cool after the brightness of midday. A breeze slips past you carrying the aroma of stewed onions, pepper, and something meaty simmering slowly. A low murmur of conversation washes over you, steady as a tide, punctuated occasionally by the clatter of a wooden cup. You find a seat on a long bench near the wall. The wood is smooth from years of elbows, cloaks, and uncounted weary backs. A serving woman approaches, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back with a simple ribbon. Lines of fatigue frame her eyes, but there is something amused in the way she tilts her head, as though she sees more than she comments on. Without being asked, she sets a cup of watered ale in front of you. It's clear she has already judged what you're most likely to afford. You nod your thanks, and she returns the nod with the faintest curl of a smile. The ale is cool, thin, slightly sour, but refreshing all the same. You sip and feel the dryness in your throat ease, the warmth of the harbor fade from your skin. When your meal arrives, it comes in a wooden bowl. Fish stew thick with barley, onions, and a few wilted greens. The broth is salty, rich, and faintly smoky. You take a spoonful. The fish is soft, falling apart at the touch, and the barley adds a comforting weight to each bite. You eat slowly, watching the room. A group of sailors sits near the hearth, their boots muddy, their laughter edged with exhaustion. One of them gestures widely, describing something, a storm, perhaps, or a creature in the water, and nearly knocks over his mug. His companions shove him lightly, half teasing, half encouraging. At another table, a pair of merchants lean over parchment, whispering with the fervor of people counting profits not yet earned. A young woman near the door mends a ripped sleeve, her needle moving with soft, rhythmic determination. Outside, someone shouts, not a scream, just a raised voice, followed by a burst of laughter. The serving woman glances toward the noise, shakes her head slightly, and mutters, always around midday. You look at her, curious, but she's already moving toward another table, her steps soft despite how tired her legs must be. You finish your stew, using the last crust of bread to scrape the bowl clean. The warmth of the meal settles in your chest, heavy in the pleasant way. You sit a while longer, watching the dust hover lazily in a beam of sunlight that manages to slip through the doorway. There is no hurry here. Time, in a port city, stretches and compresses according to its own logic. Frantic at dawn, languid at midday, unpredictable by evening. When you leave the tavern, the street has changed again. The sun sits directly overhead, casting short, sharp shadows beneath carts and doorways. The stones radiate heat, turning the air into a wavering shimmer. The harbor bell rings once, a deep, resonant sound, marking the midpoint of the day. People pause for only a moment, just long enough for the sound to settle in their bones, then continue their tasks. You walk uphill a little, into the part of town where guild workshops cluster together like siblings who seldom agree but always stay close. The smell of metal reaches you first, a mix of smoke, hot iron, and the faint sweetness of charcoal. A blacksmith stands shirtless in the heat, hammering a glowing piece of metal that sparks with each strike. Sweat runs down his temples, carving clean lines in the soot on his skin. The rhythm of his hammer is hypnotic, steady, deliberate, unhurried. You watch for a moment, feeling each impact resonate in your chest like a slow drum. Farther down the lane, a carpenter works beneath a canvas awning. Wood shavings curl around his feet like pale ribbons. He fits a plank into place, taps it gently, then steps back to examine the frame of what will eventually become a cart. His apprentice sands the curved edges, the rasp making a soft, gritty whisper. The smell of fresh wood mingles with the metallic tang of the smith's workshop, creating a layered scent both sharp and comforting. A group of apprentices from the scribes' guild pass you, their arms full of scrolls and ledgers. They move quickly, muttering about deadlines and ink stains. Their robes are clean enough to reveal that they do not work with their hands, but their anxious steps suggest a labor of another kind. A labor of mistakes feared, masters scrutinizing, margins shrinking. One of them nearly drops a stack of parchment. You help steady it with a hand. He gives you a grateful, startled look, as though surprised kindness can exist at midday. You continue on. In another part of the city, the washerwomen gather near a communal basin. Their hands move briskly in the water, scrubbing fabric with practiced efficiency. The air is filled with the slap of wet cloth, the squeak of wooden tubs, the rise and fall of conversation. One woman tells a story about a neighbor's goat with such dramatic flair that her companions burst into laughter, their voices echoing against the stone walls. You catch only fragments of the tale, but the joy in their laughter is contagious. Past the basin, you find yourself in a quieter neighborhood where the city's wealth is more visible. Houses here have glass windows, not many, not large, but enough to signal status. Doors are painted. A few homes have potted herbs along their steps. A pair of well-dressed men stroll together, speaking with the gentle arrogance of people accustomed to being heard. They glance at you, not rudely, merely assessing your place in the unspoken hierarchy. Their attention is brief, like a candle flickering once before settling back into stillness. You wander through this area only briefly. This polished quiet feels like clothing tailored for someone else. You turn back toward the pulse of the port, the part of the city where people move with purpose instead of pretense, where smells are more honest, where streets carry the marks of laboring feet. On your way downhill, you pass a small shrine set into the corner of a stone wall. Candles flicker inside, their flames trembling in the afternoon heat. Someone has left a bundle of rosemary on the step. For luck, for calm seas, for a loved one's safe return. You pause, placing your hand briefly on the warm stone. The moment holds a stillness that feels carved out of the noisy day, a pocket of quiet that belongs only to those who notice it. You step away gently, as though not to disturb it. A short walk brings you back to the harbor's edge. The tide has risen noticeably. Waves lap closer to the quay, licking the stone with slow devotion. The air is heavier, dense with humidity and the faint scent of fish drying somewhere nearby. Sunlight flashes off the water in shards, bright enough to make you squint. A dog sleeps in the shade of a barrel, its paws twitching as though dreaming of chasing gulls, or perhaps dreaming of a world in which gulls are less smug. Work continues with a different rhythm now. The frenzy of the ship's arrival has faded into the practical business of sorting goods, recording quantities, negotiating prices, and moving cargo from place to place. Workers haul crates with steady determination, their shirts clinging to their backs. A captain leans over a map with the harbor master, pointing at distant coasts with expressions that suggest both ambition and dread. You notice a man sitting alone on a coil of rope, rubbing his shoulder with slow, careful motions. His clothes mark him as a laborer, but his posture suggests someone who has carried one load too many. You catch his eye, he offers a tired smile. You return it, aware that in a city like this, such small exchanges are the closest many people come to kindness during the working day. The sun finally begins to ease downward, not enough to cool the air, but enough to stretch shadows across the quay. A faint breeze moves in from the water, carrying a hint of relief. You breathe it in, letting it settle against your skin. The world seems to soften by a fraction. Children appear again, as they always do in the late afternoon, chasing one another between barrels and crates with absolute disregard for the invisible boundaries adults respect. A few harbor workers call out warnings, half-hearted, knowing from experience that children learn best through narrowly avoided consequences. The children laugh, free of aches, debts, and deadlines. Their joy ripples through the quay like bright threads woven through darker cloth. A man selling boiled potatoes sets up a small stand. The smell drifts across the harbor, earthy, warm, comforting. You buy one mostly for the pleasure of holding something hot. The potato steams in your hands. Its skin is soft, the flesh inside fluffy, sprinkled with a pinch of coarse salt. You eat slowly, savoring each bite. The simple taste seems to anchor you in the moment, grounding you amid the bustle. And still the day has not finished its long stretch. You walk further along the pier, where fewer people gather. The city's noise thins into a distant hum, softened by the crashing of waves against the breakwater. You pause here not because you're tired, but because the view urges you to. The water expands outward, vast and indifferent. Ships bob gently, their silhouettes dark against the shifting glow of afternoon. Masts sway like slender trees, creaking in the wind. A sailor sits nearby mending a sail. The cloth lies across his knees, needle flashing in the sun. His movements are calm, methodical. You watch him for a moment, noting the quiet patience in his work. He hums a tune under his breath, a low, wandering melody that blends with the rhythm of the waves. He doesn't notice you at first, and when he finally lifts his gaze, he nods in quiet acknowledgement. You nod back, wordless companions in the simple act of existing beside the sea. As the afternoon deepens, the harbor prepares for evening. Workers begin stacking tools, tying off ropes, wiping sweat from their brows. A few stretch their backs, exhausted but satisfied in the way people are after labor that leaves no room for thought beyond the next step. The taverns will soon fill. The streets will shift into their nighttime cadence, softer but not necessarily calmer. You stand for a moment longer, feeling the weight of the day settle into your bones. The city has shown you its noon, hot, busy, stubborn, alive. And yet, There is still the evening to come, with its lantern-lit alleys, its stories told over mugs of ale, its quiet dangers and gentle comforts. And though the sun is sinking slowly, reluctantly, your day in this medieval port city is far from over. The late afternoon folds itself into something gentler. Not cooler. No. The stones still radiate the day's warmth like old bones remembering fire, but softer, quieter in its edges. The sun hangs lower, turning the harbor gold in uneven patches, as though painting only where the brush feels inspired. Shadows stretch long and thin across the quay, reaching for each other like tired limbs. You begin to walk again, pacing yourself with the tide. The water has risen fully now, pushing small waves against the stone like a polite insistence. Each splash carries a faint scent of kelp and silt, the sea breathing its stories in your direction. A lazy gull glides above you, letting the wind do most of the work. Its cry is half-hearted, the sound of a creature whose ambitions for the day have dwindled to perhaps a leftover fish head. You turn into a narrow street leading uphill, one that seems carved between houses squeezed together as if for warmth. Laundry lines stretch overhead, the cloth stirring gently in the breeze. Tunics faded by sun and seawater, aprons stained with flour or fish scales, children's shirts patched so many times the stitching forms accidental patterns. As you walk beneath them, the damp hems brush your shoulders like passing whispers. The sounds here differ from the harbor. Fewer shouts, more conversations. Doors closing, pots clinking, the murmur of early suppers being prepared. The clang of a spoon against a metal pot echoes down the lane. Somewhere, a lute plucks a hesitant tune. Just a few notes, like someone testing whether music has the courage to appear today. A woman stands at her doorway peeling potatoes, the skins falling into a wooden bucket. She glances up, gives you a nod that carries equal measures of curiosity and disinterest, and continues her work. The knife moves in swift, practiced arcs. The potato skins curl like thin shavings of parchment. You catch a brief whiff of the raw, earthy scent, something grounding, unpretentious. The lane opens into a small square paved with uneven stones. A well stands in the center, its bucket damp, ropes frayed. Two teenagers bicker amiably as they take turns hauling water, each insisting the other is doing it wrong. Their laughter rings through the square, competing briefly with the squeal of a cart rolling over a rut. You pause at the well's edge. When the bucket is lifted, droplets scatter across the stones, cool against the lingering heat. One touches the back of your hand before you can move. It leaves behind a tiny circle of cold, like a secret whispered directly onto your skin. A cat winds around your ankle, its fur warm from the sun, its purr vibrating softly. You bend to scratch behind its ears. It tolerates you for 3 strokes, then departs with dignity, as cats do, leaving you with the slight feeling you've been evaluated. From the square, a broad avenue slopes gently back toward the sea. You take it, letting your steps slow, letting the city guide you more than you guide yourself. Evening has begun its patient work. Lanterns being lit one by one, shutters closing against future winds, voices lowering in pitch. The city doesn't sleep yet. Not for hours, but it reshapes its atmosphere, trading labor for restlessness. You notice a line of people outside a public bread oven. They wait calmly, baskets in arms, the heat inside the stone structure drifting outward in thick, fragrant waves. A boy pulls out a loaf larger than his forearm, its crust golden and cracked. The warmth escapes in a rush of steam. You inhale deeply wheat, yeast, and the faint smoky trace of firewood. It's tempting, but you've already had your supper for now, and the evening still has more scents in store. Farther along, the street narrows again, twisting in deliberate confusion. Houses jut at odd angles. Corners appear too quickly. Doors seem arranged by whim rather than logic. It is a place you could get lost in, pleasantly, harmlessly, in a way that reassures you the city has many faces, not just the one it shows to the harbor. From one doorway comes the smell of hot tallow and something herbal. A candle maker sits near a table, dipping wicks into a pot of melted wax. His hands are steady, He barely glances up as you pass. Hanging from the rafters are rows of newly formed candles, their surfaces smooth and slightly opaque. The scent, a mix of warm fat, rosemary, and beeswax, swirls around you like a soft fog. Past the candle maker, you come upon a cloth merchant's shop left half open to the evening. The interior glows with lamplight, casting gentle warmth over folded fabrics. Wool in earthy hues, linen in soft, muted tones. A few expensive, brightly dyed bolts sit high on a shelf, as though afraid of being touched. The merchant herself is counting coins, her lips moving silently as she stacks them. When she sees you, she lifts her chin in polite acknowledgement. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, imply she could guess your entire financial situation by the shoes you wear. You smile faintly and continue on. The air cools a little as you near the harbor again. The sun, leaning close to the horizon, paints the water in long ribbons of amber and rose. The stone beneath your feet retains its warmth, but the breeze carries a whisper of coming night. A few sailors sit on overturned barrels, sharing a jug of something potent. One sings a tune too low to carry, swaying subtly. Another taps the rhythm on the wooden rim, his fingers making soft, hollow sounds. A group of children run past, chasing each other with shrieks that echo off the walls. Their laughter has grown wilder with dusk, as though daylight's boundaries loosen at the edges. A mother calls after them, not expecting obedience. They vanish into an alley like a flock of noisy birds. You find a spot at the end of a pier, an old one, its boards gray and worn, creaking gently under your steps. This part of the harbor is quieter, used less for trade and more for tying small boats that rarely travel far. You sit on the edge, feet dangling above the water. The wood is warm beneath you, still holding the day's heat. The breeze brushes against your cheeks, lightly salted. The water below slips in slow swirls, glimmering faintly. A floating piece of driftwood knocks gently against the pier, then drifts away. The sound is soft, just a mild wooden tap, but it repeats in irregular intervals, forming a kind of sleepy rhythm. The ropes hum quietly in the shifting wind. Somewhere far off, a bell rings. 3 slow chimes, signaling nothing urgent, simply habit. A fisherman approaches, carrying 2 nets slung over his shoulder. His clothes carry the scent of brine, his boots dark with saltwater stains. He nods at you as he steps onto a small boat tied to the pier. You watch him test the ropes, check the nets, arrange a lantern at the bow. His movements are slow but purposeful. You recognize the kind of tiredness that comes from years of waking before dawn, of memorizing the sea's moods, of hauling nets heavy with fish or disappointing with emptiness. He pushes off inland toward the deeper waters. His lantern glows weakly in the coming dusk, swaying like a shy star pinned near the surface. You watch it drift until the ripples consume its reflection. Behind you, the city transitions again. Voices soften, doors close, lanterns multiply, the taverns swell with life. Singing, arguing, laughing, the occasional thud of a mug set down too firmly. The smell of ale, firewood, and roasted meat blends into a heavy, warm cloud that drifts through the lower streets. You rise and wander toward one of the quayside taverns, drawn less by hunger and more by curiosity. Its sign, a faded painting of a ship with an exaggerated number of sails, swings lazily. Inside, the warmth is immediate, wrapping around you with the thick familiarity of wool. The light is low, golden, flickering from candles and a small hearth. You find a seat where the wall leans comfortably behind your back. The wooden bench is polished by time, smooth beneath your fingertips. The table holds faint echoes of past meals, knife marks, spilled ale dried into uneven blotches, initials carved with varying levels of artistry. The tavern keeper, a stocky man with a beard that seems to have been trimmed by negotiation rather than scissors, brings you a mug without asking. You sip. The drink is stronger than the midday ale, with a mild bite at the end. It warms your throat in a slow, creeping way. At a nearby table, a pair of sailors exchange stories that sound suspiciously exaggerated. One gestures broadly, nearly knocking over his companion's mug. They laugh when a drop spills, arguing about whose fault it was. A woman in a deep blue dress sits farther back, her hands moving gracefully as she tells a quiet tale to the two men beside her. Their eyes widen at certain parts. Fear, astonishment, admiration. You cannot tell. Her voice is too low for you to catch the words, but the cadence alone draws you in. A boy with a tray weaves through the room, collecting empty cups. He bumps into your table, accidentally, but closely enough that his eyes widen in apology. You smile at him. He relaxes and continues on, humming off-key. The fire in the hearth snaps gently, releasing tiny sparks that vanish before reaching the stone floor. The smell of burning wood mixes with that of roasted onions and bread. The tavern's ceiling is low, its beams dark with age. Shadows curl in the corners like content cats. You sip slowly, feeling your muscles unwind. The warmth in the room works its way into your bones. Someone begins to play a flute, just a simple melody, lilting and slow. Conversation quiets for a moment, not out of reverence but shared appreciation. The notes hover like drifting feathers. Night fully arrives outside. You feel it more than see it. A shift in pressure, a change in temperature, a hush settling over distant rooftops. When you step outside again, the harbor is bathed in lantern light. Reflections stretch across the dark water in trembling streaks. The air carries a slight chill now, enough to make you pull your cloak tighter. Ships sway with the tide, groaning softly. A few figures still move along the quay. Late workers, lingering sailors, the occasional wanderer like yourself. A cat darts between crates, hunting something only it can sense. A lantern flickers near the end of the pier, illuminating a pair of fishermen mending nets before the next day breaks. You walk slowly, savoring the night's gentleness. The city is quieter now but still awake, like a storyteller catching their breath before the last chapter. Small windows glow warmly. The distant hum of tavern voices drifts from several directions. The sea grumbles against the walls, endlessly patient. You find yourself wandering back toward your lodging, not out of obligation, but because your body begins to feel the softness of the hour. The climb uphill is easier in the cool air. Your thoughts move slower, like a tide retreating into calm shallows. When you reach your door, the wood feels cool beneath your hand. Inside, your small room is dim, lit only by the moon filtering through the warped glass. You sit on the edge of your bed. The straw mattress shifts with a familiar rustle. You breathe in the scent of the room, wool, wood, faint smoke, a hint of salt carried on your clothes. Outside, the harbor murmurs. The city breathes. The night wraps itself around you gently. And though your day in this medieval port city has been long, the story of it is only beginning to settle into your bones. Your room settles around you with the quiet confidence of a place that knows its purpose. The wooden beams hold the coolness of night. The small window lets in a thin ribbon of moonlight that stretches timidly across the floorboards. You sit for a moment, letting your breath catch up to the rhythm of the evening, feeling the day's warmth evaporate from your skin. But sleep does not claim you yet. There is a tug somewhere behind your ribs, soft, polite, insistent, inviting you back outside. Something in this medieval port city is different at night, something you haven't yet seen. You rise again, slowly, your joints murmuring in protest. Your cloak hangs on a wooden peg. When you take it, the wool smells faintly of smoke and salt, as though it has been listening to the harbor far longer than you have. You descend the narrow stairs with careful steps. The landlord snores faintly behind a door, the sound muffled, steady, oddly comforting. The latch clicks softly as you ease the door open and slip into the night. The street greets you like an old friend, dim, uneven, alive. Lanterns flicker in small glass boxes attached to doorways. Their flames quiver in the wind, casting shadows that stretch and curl like curious creatures. The air holds a coolness that wasn't there earlier, a subtle bite that wakes your skin. You walk downhill, following the familiar curve of the street. The city rests differently now. Its busy heartbeat has slowed, its noises softened into a muffled choir. A dog barks once in the distance, the sound swallowed almost immediately by the thick night air. The houses seem to lean closer together in the dark, their crooked angles exaggerated by shadow. Wooden shutters creak softly where a breeze slips through. You catch smells as you pass. Stale bread from a bakery cooling after a long day. The metallic tang of spilled ale near a tavern. The tender sweetness of someone's late-night broth drifting from an open window. A cat crosses your path, its steps silent, its fur shining silver under the moonlight. It pauses to regard you with the indifferent wisdom of creatures that have watched humans stumble through centuries of nighttime streets. Then it darts away, vanishing between crates stacked by a doorway. You continue toward the harbor. Here the night opens like a slow breath. The sea is darker now, almost black, its surface reflecting the moon in broken, trembling patches. The tide pushes gently against the stone, the sound soft and repetitive. A watery heartbeat reminding the city that it is always half afloat. Wooden hulls creak as they sway, ropes mutter and tighten, pulleys give off faint metallic clicks. The harbor at night is not asleep. It simply speaks more quietly. You walk along the pier you visited earlier. Lanterns sway on tall poles, their light shimmering across the water like faint golden bridges you could almost walk on. A few boats bob gently, their silhouettes hunched and peaceful. A night watchman passes you, carrying a staff and a lantern. His cloak flaps lightly around his boots. When he notices you, he nods politely, not suspicious, not surprised. In a port city, someone walking alone at night is unremarkable. People wander for many reasons. Loneliness, work, restlessness, debts, or simply because the sea calls louder after dark. You nod back, and he continues on, his lantern casting small circles of light that shrink behind him. You find a quiet spot at the edge of the pier and sit again, the wood cool beneath you. The night breeze carries a stronger scent of seawater now. Brine, kelp, a faint fishiness softened into something soothing by distance. You pull your cloak closer around your shoulders. Below, the water shifts with a soft hush, brushing the pier's supports. Seaweed tangles in lazy drifts. A jellyfish glows faintly in the depths, its pale body pulsing like a ghost lantern. A flicker of life suspended in darkness. Somewhere near the far end of the harbor, someone is playing a flute. The melody is slow and uncertain, like a lullaby whispered to itself. The notes travel unevenly on the wind, broken here, carried further there, creating a patchwork of sound that seems to stitch the night together. You breathe in deeply and feel the tension of the day ease, dissolving somewhere between the flute and the sea. After a while, you rise again. The quiet pulls you gently toward another corner of the city. There is a small path along the inner harbor wall, one that few use at night. You walk it now, your steps muffled by damp stone. The wall beside you is rough, cold, and smells faintly of lichen. To your left, the sea laps against the stones. To your right, a row of warehouses looms in spectral shapes. You peer into a cracked window of one. Inside, the moonlight reveals burlap sacks stacked in neat towers. A lantern hangs unlit from a beam. Dust dances in disturbed air like pale insects. You wonder who last locked the door, and whether they whispered a quick prayer for their goods before leaving. Farther along, you find a carpenter sitting outside his workshop, sharpening a small knife by lantern light. His posture is relaxed, his expression thoughtful. The metallic whisper of the blade against the whetstone fills the narrow space. He glances up as you pass, offering a quiet smile, the kind exchanged by two people awake at an unnecessary hour for reasons neither feels obliged to explain. You return the smile and continue walking. The city grows quieter still. You wander past a row of homes with small, shuttered windows. Here, the street widens, lit only by moonlight. The cobblestones shine faintly, like the scales of some enormous sleeping creature. A soft mist begins to gather near the ground, curling around your feet with cold fingers. The mist thickens. Eventually, it forms a veil over the lower streets, disguising the uneven stones and the sloping gutters. You move through it slowly, watching your breath mingle with the silver air. The mist carries smells differently. The harbor's salt sharpens. Chimney smoke softens to a sweet haze. The The scent of herbs drying near a window becomes suddenly potent, earthy, and warm. You feel suspended in a world that resembles the port city but not entirely. The outlines blur. The colors fade to gray-blue. The sounds turn muffled, as though heard through cloth. A dog emerges from the fog, tail swaying lazily. Pauses, evaluates your presence, decides you're not interesting, and disappears again. Eventually the mist thins and lifts as the wind shifts direction. You find yourself near the communal oven again. The stones still radiate warmth, and the air carries the lingering scent of baked bread, a fragrance that feels like kindness. A lone figure sits beside the oven, sipping from a cup. You cannot see their face clearly, only the calm posture of someone who has worked enough for one day. They nod at you in a way that says, "The night is long, and we both know it." You nod back, letting the quiet acknowledgement pass between you like a shared blanket. You continue toward your lodging, but take a different route this time, one that leads through a narrow archway barely tall enough for you to duck under. The stones are slick, the air confined. A trickle of water runs along the side, catching moonlight in silver threads. Here, the city feels older. The walls are rougher, patched in places where age has eaten at them. A wooden balcony above you creaks faintly even though no one walks on it. Ivy snakes up the wall in dark coils, its leaves trembling in the faint wind. You brush your fingers along the stone as you walk. It is cool to the touch, worn smooth in some places, sharp in others. You think of all the hands that touched these same stones. Merchants carrying crates, children chasing each other, lovers whispering in corners, sailors returning from nights that felt too long. You step into a courtyard enclosed by tall walls. A single lantern hangs from an iron bracket, its flame steady. In the center, a stone trough collects rainwater. The surface reflects the moon like a broken coin. A few flower pots sit along the edges, wilted from the heat of the day, but still alive. The silence feels cathedral-like. You remain there a moment, breathing slowly, feeling your heartbeat fall into rhythm with the stillness. Night in this city contains more truth than daylight. Shadows soften harsh edges. Sounds reveal their sincerity. People reveal their weariness. The sea shows its true color. The city exhales and becomes itself. Eventually, you make your way back up the crooked steps toward your room. Inside, the shadows feel familiar now. You light a small candle, its flame quivering gently. You sit on the edge of your bed again. Your body responds with a relieved sigh, a sound that does not escape your lips, but lives somewhere deeper. You remove your boots. The floorboards are cool beneath your feet. You loosen your belt, feeling the tension in your waist release. You rest your hands on your knees and allow your eyes to close for a moment. There is no danger tonight, no urgency, no harshness. Only the quiet accumulation of hours. You blow out the candle. Moonlight returns, stretching thin and soft across the floor. Outside, the harbor murmurs as ships settle into sleep. A faint breeze brushes against the window, carrying the scent of salt, wood, and distant lantern smoke. You lie down on the straw mattress. The wool blanket rises to meet your body with gentle heaviness. You shift once, twice, until your limbs find their place. Your thoughts drift like boats turning with the tide. You let them, and somewhere between one breath and the next, the medieval port city settles around you like a cradle, holding you steady in its quiet, unhurried night. And though your eyes grow heavy, the story of this place is not finished yet. Not until the dawn returns and reminds you that even the gentlest cities change their faces with the tide. You sleep, but the city does not quite leave you alone. It lingers in your dreams as a tangle of masts and alleys, of lantern light trembling on dark water, of footsteps on stone that never quite resolve into faces. You drift in and out of these images without worry. The harbor's murmur seeps into your sleep and rearranges itself into soft, strange stories that don't need to make sense. At some unclear moment, your eyes open again. You are not fully awake. Not yet. The room is still underwater dark, but the blackness has thinned at the edges, like ink diluted by timid light. The air has cooled. Your breath rises in faint white puffs when you exhale toward the window. You lie for a moment, listening. The city is quieter than before, but not silent. You hear the deep, distant hush of the sea, the slow roll of its weight against the harbor walls. A rope creaks somewhere, the sound thin and lonely. Boards knock together with soft, hollow taps. From the floor below, the faintest clink of pottery. Someone up earlier than you, moving carefully not to wake the rest. You shift under the blanket. The wool scratches reassuringly at your chin. The straw in the mattress has rearranged itself while you slept. You feel new lumps in unexpected places, small reminders that beds here are not interested in perfection. You could fall asleep again. It would be easy. But there is something about the world just before dawn that tugs you gently by the sleeve. A feeling that if you sleep through it, you'll miss a quiet secret meant only for those who rise when the sky hasn't decided what color to be yet. So you sit up. Your breath fogs a little as you move. The floorboards greet your bare feet with a sharp chill that rushes up your legs. You pull on your clothes slowly, the fabric stiff with yesterday's sweat and smoke. When you reach for your cloak, the wool feels cooler than you expect, as if it too has been dreaming. You open the shutter halfway. Outside, the sky is a deep, bruised blue, fading toward gray near the horizon. A narrow band of lighter color hints that the sun is somewhere, thinking about its responsibilities. The roofs of the city are shadowy shapes, their outlines softened by a thin film of mist that rests over the harbor like a drowsy cat. You step into the stairwell. The boards creak under your weight, small complaints that the night is ending. You can smell something warm from below, porridge, perhaps, or bread crusts warming near the embers. At this hour, even the plainest food smells like generosity. In the main room, the landlord's wife is already awake, tying a scarf around her hair. Her movements are slower than they will be later, still heavy with sleep. She nods to you once, as if to say, the world is starting again, and you're in it, for better or worse. On the table, a wooden bowl waits with a scoop of thick porridge, steam rising in faint, twisting ribbons. You sit. The porridge is simple: oats, water, a pinch of salt. It sticks to the spoon and to your ribs the way it's supposed to. You blow on each bite, feeling the steam touch your face. It tastes of earth and work and the quiet kind of care that doesn't announce itself. Someone woke before you so this bowl would be here. You finish, nod your thanks, and step out into the street. The world is a breath held halfway. The pre-dawn air presses cool and damp against your cheeks. The cobblestones glisten slightly from a night's worth of condensation, each one blunted with moisture. A thin mist clings low to the ground, weaving around your ankles like smoke that has changed its mind. Behind you, a door closes softly. Ahead of you, the harbor waits out of sight but not out of hearing. You walk downhill. The sounds are small but distinct in this half-light. A broom scratching across a doorstep, a bucket being set down with care, hooves clicking slowly as someone leads a horse rather than rides it. Your own steps echo more than they will later, when the city is louder and more distracted. You pass a window where a candle flickers. Inside, a woman braids her hair with sleepy fingers, her reflection fractured in the imperfect glass. In another house, a child sits wrapped in a blanket, watching the world through a crack in the shutter, eyes wide and solemn, as if guarding the dawn. The smell of baking hits you again sooner than you expect. Down near the harbor, the ovens are already alive. Coarse loaves for dockworkers, rolls for merchants, dense slabs for sailors who know they won't see fresh bread for weeks once they leave. The air is thick with flour dust and warm yeast, a scent so comforting that it almost makes you forget how hard most people's day will be. You reach the quay. The harbor in this light is a different creature. The water is smooth and dark, like poured ink. The masts stand as pale streaks against the dim sky. Lanterns still burn at intervals along the pier, their flames small and stubborn in the grayness. The mist hangs low over the surface, blurring the line where sea ends and city begins. You lean on the cold stone edge and breathe. The salt in the air is sharper at this hour, not yet diluted by sun and sweat and smoke. It stings your nose faintly, clears your thoughts. You lick your lips and taste it there too, salt, and a trace of tar from some rope you must have touched without noticing, and the ghost of last night's ale. A fisherman walks by with slow steps, his boots making a hollow, wet sound on the stones. His eyes are half-lidded, his face unshaven, his breath a cloud in front of him. He nods to you once, a gesture of shared membership in the small, quiet society of people awake sooner than strictly necessary. He climbs into his boat without a word, untying the rope with movements so familiar they look like instinct. The boat slides away with hardly a splash, swallowed almost immediately by the mist. Nearby, a group of dockworkers gather near a stack of crates, their voices low and rough. They stand with their arms tucked close against the cold, shoulders hunched. One of them yawns so widely it looks dangerous. Another rolls his neck until it cracks, then winces with the delayed regret of someone whose body has more history than he'd like. This is the part of the port city visitors rarely imagine. The hour before the stories start. People romanticize harbors. They think of bright sails and daring captains, of treasure-laden ships, of mysterious strangers stepping onto the quay in dramatic cloaks. They picture picturesque sunsets and taverns full of songs and laughter and only the most attractive kinds of trouble. They don't picture this. They don't picture the men and women who rise in the cold before dawn to carry heavy things they do not own. They don't picture hands cracked from salt and rope burn. They don't picture backs that hurt before the first crate is lifted. They don't picture porridge without honey, bread without butter, sleep without enough hours. And yet, there is a kind of romance here too. Not the noisy, dramatic kind sung in songs. A quieter version. The romance of repetition, of tide and labor and habit, of knowing the way the stones feel under your boots in the dark, of recognizing a coworker's cough before you see their face in the mist, of trusting the sea just enough to live beside it, but not enough to relax. You stand a while longer, watching the harbor shake off what remains of night. The darkness fades, not all at once, but in thin layers. The sky shifts from deep blue to a lighter, uncertain gray. Rooftops reappear clearly. Windows gain definition. The masts lose their ghostliness and become merely tall, practical things again. The mist begins to lift, shredding itself into smaller fragments until it is no more than a few reluctant wisps. Sounds grow bolder. A cart rattles over the cobbles, its iron-rimmed wheels complaining. Someone laughs, loudly this time. A gull screams overhead with renewed enthusiasm, announcing nothing in particular. The clatter of buckets, the thud of crates, the sharp call of orders start to stitch together into the day's soundtrack. You move along the quay, letting the world wake around you. Ship crews stir on deck, emerging from below with red eyes and heavy steps. A cabin boy rushes to and fro, trying to look useful. A cook empties a bucket over the side. The water splashes into the sea, sending up a cold spray that brushes your face with fine droplets. It smells faintly of last night's stew. A dock foreman goes over a list with a clerk, both of them squinting in the dim light, arguing in hushed tones about numbers that don't quite please either. Their breath punctuates each sentence in small puffs. As the light strengthens, the harbor transforms from dreamscape back into workplace. You feel the shift in yourself too. Somewhere inside, something settles. A recognition of how this place truly is. Not just the version from stories, but the lived-in, slightly weary truth. You think of how people in some distant future might imagine this port. They might picture only the romance. The ships, the distant lands, the roaring taverns. They might forget the rough wool, the damp straw, the early porridge, the smell of fish that never really leaves your clothes. They might forget the way cold stone bites your feet at dawn, or how your fingers stiffen in winter when wet ropes freeze as you grip them. But you are here. You know the way the harbor smells when the tide is low and the mud is exposed. You know the exact sound of a crate dragging when one side catches on a crack in the stone. You know the way the city's roofs look when lit from below by the first rays of the sun, like tired sentries who have made it through another night. Reality is less shiny than romance, but it is steadier, and somehow kinder in its own rough, unpolished way. The sun's rim finally clears the horizon, a pale disk at first, then brighter. Light pours down the streets in long beams, catching on puddles, glass, polished metal. The mist is gone. The sky begins to show hints of blue instead of gray. The workers straighten their backs a little. Someone claps another on the shoulder. A woman adjusts her scarf and sets her jaw in that particular way that says, another day, then another, and then another after that. You feel the weight of it all and also the strange comfort. Here things repeat. The tide comes in, goes out. Ships arrive, depart. Goods are loaded, unloaded. People are born, grow up, work, grow old. Stories change, but the pattern stays. There is uncertainty at sea, but on land, in the harbor, the rhythm is stubbornly familiar. You follow the street back uphill. The stones are drier now, warming under the new sunlight. The smell of the city changes once more. The salt becomes background. The foreground fills with bread and smoke and the faint sweetness of morning's first spilled wine. A dog shakes itself violently near a doorway, sending a spray of droplets into the air. They glitter briefly, then vanish. The city is truly awake now. It feels a little strange, knowing that you have seen it in all its moods. Its quiet pre-dawn hesitation, its sharp noon, its soft twilight, its lantern-lit night. You carry these versions of the port inside you now, layered like sediment. You reach your doorway again. The wood is warm where the sun touches it, cool where the shadow still clings. You rest your palm there for a moment, feeling both temperatures at once. The landlord's youngest child sits on the step, tracing lines in the dust with a stick. When they see you, they offer a solemn nod, as if acknowledging some secret membership you've earned simply by being awake when sensible people were not. You nod back, equally solemn, as if to say, yes, I've seen it too. You climb the stairs once more, each step familiar under your feet. In your room, the light falls across the bed in a bright bar. Dust motes dance lazily in it, spiraling up and down. The blanket is still rumpled from when you left. The pillow still holds the shallow hollow of your earlier sleep. You sit on the bed and exhale slowly. You are tired, but in a different way now. Not the restless tiredness of someone trapped in their thoughts. The clean tiredness of someone who has walked through a whole day and night in a place that does not pretend to be more than it is. You lie back. The mattress rustles. The ceiling beams watch you quietly. Outside, the harbor resumes its endless work. You can hear it, faintly. The calls, the creaks, the soft roar of the sea could be the sound of centuries if you let your mind stretch far enough. You close your eyes. When people think of the past, they rarely imagine the small things. The way wool itches, the taste of cheap ale, the precise squeak of a certain stair, the feel of chilly air leaking through cracks at dawn. They don't picture scrambled hair and stubbed toes and the dozens of little discomforts that never make it into ballads. But those small things are what life is mostly made of. You have felt them tonight, and somehow, instead of making the past less magical, they make it more real, and so, in a different way, more precious. You let your breathing slow. In your mind, the harbor stays with you. Golden at sunset, silver at night, blue-gray at dawn. You see again the flicker of lanterns on water, the shadow of a fisherman pushing off into the fog, the quiet nods of strangers who share nothing with you except this same patch of earth and this same shifting sea. You sink into the mattress, and into the gentle, repetitive lullaby of a port city that has seen more days than it can count and will see more after you are gone. And somewhere, under all of it, under the stone and the salt and the sounds, you feel a soft, steady truth. For one long, unhurried loop of time, you were here. And that is enough. Your thoughts unhook themselves like ships leaving the quay. You watch them drift away, and the medieval harbor, with all its smells and aches and glimmers, folds itself into the softest corner of your mind, where stories go when they are not quite finished and not quite needed. You are still listening to the tide, and already half asleep. When you finally wake again, the room is brighter than you expect. Sunlight pushes through the warped glass in soft, uneven patches, turning the dust in the air into slow-moving constellations. For a moment, you don't move. Your body feels pleasantly heavy, as though sleep has wrapped itself around you like a second blanket. Your hands rest loosely on the wool. Your breath is deep, steady, unhurried. And then the city reminds you where you are. A cart rattles loudly outside, far too loudly for this delicate hour. Someone shouts a greeting you don't understand but recognize by tone. Cheerful, busy, already halfway into the day. A gull screams in protest at something trivial, and another joins it, and suddenly the harbor is no longer a dream but a fact. You sit up slowly. Your spine cracks once, politely. The air is warmer than last night, but still cool enough that you bristle when your feet touch the floorboards. The wood feels dry now, sun-warmed in patches, cold in others. You pull your cloak around your shoulders out of habit rather than necessity. Before stepping outside, you splash your face with water from the basin. It's a little stale, a little metallic, but the cold shocks your senses awake. You feel clearer, sharper, like a knife honed just enough to be useful but not enough to be dangerous. You open the shutter. Today, the sky is calmer, gentle blue with lazy stretches of thin cloud. No threatening storms, no strange colors reflected in the water, no dramatic winds stirring the sails. Just a steady, quiet morning that promises to become a busy day whether or not you're ready. You breathe in deeply, letting your lungs fill with a mixture of sea and city. Tar, bread, salt, smoke, humanity. You descend the stairs, careful not to step on the one plank that sticks out just enough to argue with your toes. The landlord's wife is awake again, though she seems brighter than she did in the pre-dawn hours. Her sleeves are rolled up. There's flour on her cheek. She moves with brisk purpose. When she notices you, she swats a fly with the kind of efficiency that comes only from long experience. She sets down a piece of coarse bread and a small cup of ale for you. No speech, no ceremony. Just the simple agreement that living requires eating. You thank her softly and take your place at the table. The bread is crusty today, chewier than yesterday's, with a pleasant sourness from a long-fermented dough. The ale is mild, with a faint grassy note. Someone must have used a newer batch of grain. Together, they create a breakfast that doesn't thrill you but steadies you. That's all you need. You leave the house and step into the sun. This morning feels different. Not because the city has changed, but because you have. Familiarity reshapes things. Streets that were once a maze feel like suggestions. Smells that were overwhelming soften into layers you can now distinguish. The resin in the ropes, the yeast on the breeze, the iron scent of harbor water, the faint perfume of crushed herbs beneath someone's heel. Walking downhill feels almost like ritual now. The stone path bends gently to the left, then right, following the natural slope of the land. Laundry lines hang overhead again. Today's fabric's newer than yesterday's, some still dripping from last night's washing. You catch a droplet on your wrist. It's surprisingly cold. The cloth above you sways in the morning breeze, rustling like whispered secrets. People pass you in both directions. A young apprentice carrying a box nearly too heavy for him. A merchant's wife wearing a shawl embroidered with faded thread. Her shoes too fine for this part of town. A boy carrying 2 loaves of bread under one arm and a basket of oysters under the other. His steps uneven because he tries very hard not to drop either. Your feet follow the path without needing guidance. The harbor's noise grows louder with each turn. By the time you reach the quay, the city is fully awake. Ships sway in the tide. Big ones, small ones, some patched with mismatched planks, others polished to near shine. Ropes thrum, wooden beams shift. Sailors shout instructions in a mixture of dialects. Dockworkers haul crates in lines that move like too slow, living chains. A pair of men argue about fish prices, one gesticulating with a cod that looks increasingly uncomfortable. You lean on the stone wall for a moment, watching the organized chaos unfold. A ship you haven't seen before sits at the far pier. Its sails are dark red, its hull narrow and long. The figurehead carved at the prow depicts an abstract creature you can't immediately name. Part fish, part bird, part imagination. You glance around, but no one seems particularly excited. New ships come often. Each arrives with its own stories, its own cargo, its own crew who speak of storms that may or may not have happened in islands that may or may not exist. Routine does not erase wonder. It simply places it behind a familiar curtain. You walk closer to the ship. The sailors seem tired but satisfied. One is repairing a tear in the lower sail, his fingers nimble, his expression focused. Another carries a heavy sack over his shoulder, the muscles in his arms shifting beneath tanned skin. His face is unreadable, a mask shaped by repetition. The captain stands near the ramp, inspecting a parchment. She has gray streaks in her hair and the posture of someone who survived things she will not bother retelling. You watch her in silence, admiring the calm authority she radiates. She notices you, gives a polite nod, and returns to her list. You continue along the quay. A group of teenagers linger near the water's edge, skipping stones. The surface is choppy, so most of the stones sink within seconds, but their laughter rises even when the attempt fails. They argue about technique, each insisting their method is correct despite evidence to the contrary. Nearby, a dog sniffs around a barrel, finds it disappointing, and flops down in the shade with a dramatic sigh. You wander toward the marketplace. It is livelier than yesterday. More voices, more colors, more smells layered in complex, shifting patterns. A spice seller waves a handful of dried herbs under your nose. Their aroma is sharp and minty, clearing your thoughts instantly. You cough slightly, and he laughs with gentle good humor. You move on before he convinces you to buy something you won't know how to use. A potter arranges her wares with delicate precision. Bowls glazed in milky blues, cups with thumb-sized indents, plates with sun-like patterns swirling around the edges. She smiles when she sees you looking. Her hands are stained with clay, the lines in her palms filled like tiny riverbeds. You touch a cup lightly. It is cool, smooth, and perfectly balanced. Evidence of practiced craftsmanship. You do not need it, but the simple beauty of it pleases you. The fishmonger is louder today. He slaps the side of a giant fish as he advertises its freshness. A few customers recoil, a few lean closer. The smell is undeniably strong, salt, brine, and something deep and ancient. You step away politely. You drift toward a stall selling woven baskets. The woman behind it weaves while sitting cross-legged, her fingers flying. She doesn't look up except to hand a finished piece to a waiting customer. Her stall smells of reeds and riverbanks, green and clean. You buy nothing, but the act of walking through the market feels like participation. Your day continues in soft increments, measured not by time but by impressions. A sailor teaches a child how to tie a knot. A merchant curses as a pigeon steals a handful of grain. A group of monks pass through carrying crates of books wrapped in cloth. Someone breaks a jug, and the crash echoes off the stones. A woman sells hot chestnuts from a small brazier. The smell trails behind you, and always the sea. The tide climbs, pressing closer to the edge. Sunlight scatters across its surface in bright, broken patterns. The gulls wheel above, their shadows sliding along the quay like restless hands. By late morning, the heat begins to gather again. The stones warm beneath your boots. Sweat gathers under your collar. You find yourself seeking shade wherever it appears, behind carts, beneath awnings, near the lee of a warehouse wall where a breeze funnels through. You pause near a rope walk where men twist long strands of hemp into thick coils. The smell is earthy and harsh, but fascinating in its own way. The workers move with synchronized precision, their hands guiding the fibers into place. One of them hums a slow tune, turning the work into something almost meditative. The hours unfold gently, not quickly, not slowly, just enough to remind you that time in the city moves according to the tide, not the clock. At midday, the harbor bell rings once, then twice. The sound is low, deep, carrying far across the water. People pause, not long, only long enough to acknowledge it. Then they resume their tasks with renewed intention. You find a shady spot near the water and sit on a stone ledge smoothed by countless others. A warm breeze moves through your hair. The sun diffuses in the air, softening into gold. Lunch in a port city is rarely ceremonial. A few sailors sit nearby sharing bread and pickled fish, passing a mug around. A group of dockworkers eat apples, tossing the cores into the sea with quiet satisfaction. A child gnaws on a heel of bread so seriously you suspect it is his entire focus for the day. You reach into your cloak and find the piece of bread you saved earlier. It has hardened slightly, but the salt on your lips makes it taste richer. You eat slowly, letting the barley notes linger, and take small sips of cool water from a borrowed cup. The sea keeps speaking to you, soft, repetitive, ancient, and you listen. The day is far from over, but you feel yourself sinking into its rhythm again, letting the port shape your senses, your pace, your quiet understanding of what it means to exist in a place built on tides, labor, and stories that drift in like fog. And though the sunlight grows stronger and the harbor grows louder, there is still a softness in the air, a lullaby woven through the day's noise that carries you gently along, like the tide, like the city, like something that is not finished telling you what it needs you to hear. The sun leans heavier on the city, as though it too has done its share of work and now sits on the rooftops to rest. The stones beneath you are warm enough that you feel the heat through your clothes. The air shimmers faintly above the quay, blurring the lines of crates, barrels, and bent backs. Somewhere nearby, someone has fallen silent mid-conversation, the words too tired to keep up with the light. You stand, stretching your legs, and drift back into the current of the port's day. Afternoon here is not dramatic. It is simply relentless. Dockworkers move more slowly now, not because they are lazy, quite the opposite. They move with the measured caution of people who know what happens when you rush with something heavy in your hands. Shoulders roll, knees bend carefully, hands grip just a little tighter. Every motion is deliberate, trimmed of anything unnecessary. You watch as two men lift a barrel together, bodies angled just so to spare their backs. One of them grunts softly, the other murmurs, "Easy," not to the barrel but to the day itself. They shuffle forward, set it down with a thud that vibrates through the stone. Then they wipe their foreheads and move on to the next. Above, gulls circle in languid loops, the heat making even their screeches sound slower. You walk along the edge of the quay, careful to avoid slick patches where fish scales and water combined have made the stones treacherous. A boy slips ahead of you and almost falls. He pinwheels his arms and recovers at the last moment, then looks around quickly to see who witnessed his near disaster. You pretend to be very interested in a crate to spare his pride. He straightens, chin a little higher than necessary, and trots off as if nothing had happened. In the distance, a group of sailors haul on a rope, pulling a ship closer to the dock. Their voices rise in a rough, rhythmic chant, not tuneful enough to be called a song, but steady enough to tighten muscles in time. The rope scrapes against wood. The ship obeys in tiny increments, inch by inch, until its hull rests where it's needed. No cheers follow, only a pause, a breath, and then the next task. Heat has its own dangers. You feel it tug at thoughts, soften focus, shorten tempers. Two merchants stand not far from you, arguing in low, sharp tones over a ledger. One taps the parchment with an ink-stained finger. The other folds his arms, lips pressed thin. The numbers between them are small, almost petty, but the consequences behind them loom. No one raises their voice enough to attract the harbor master's attention. Respectable disputes stay tidy. There is a hierarchy here so woven into daily life that most people hardly think of it. You can see it in clothing, the quality of wool, the width of a belt, the presence or absence of embroidery. You see it in shoes, thick leather, thin slippers, bare feet. You see it in posture, who looks over the heads of others, who keeps their gaze level, who glances down more than up. The dockworkers step aside when a wealthy merchant passes, but not with a bow, just a subtle shift in weight, a practical acceptance that fine boots don't like mud. The merchant, in turn, rarely meets their eyes, but he knows their worth in crates moved, ships filled, profits protected. They are necessary to each other, even if the relationship doesn't dress itself in politeness. Further up the quay, near a small covered area, a scribe sits at a makeshift desk. His job is to turn cargo into ink and ink back into responsibility. People approach his table one by one. A captain, a factor, a warehouse clerk. Each carries a different kind of authority in their stance. But here, under the afternoon sun, they all wait for the scratch of his quill. His fingers are stained black. His eyes squint against the light. In a city of ropes and sails and barrels, words still matter. You watch as he dips the quill, shakes off a tiny droplet, and writes slowly, each letter an anchor tying goods to names, debts to owners, mistakes to someone else's fault. A gust of wind stirs the harbor, ruffling hair and flags. With it comes a different smell. Sharper, more sour, less welcome. You turn your head and see, a little farther down, where waste is being tipped into the water. Kitchen scraps, rotting vegetables, dirty straw. It slides from a wooden chute into the sea, the sound a wet, unpleasant slurp. The surface ripples, carrying the evidence away, or at least carrying it out of sight. The truth is simple and impolite. The port is not clean. It tries. Wells are covered, water is drawn from specific sources. Rules exist about where waste can go and when. But rules can't argue with poverty. When someone's choice is between breaking a law or carrying a heavy bucket up a hill after a 12-hour day, the bucket usually wins. You pass a narrow alley that smells of damp stone and something sickly sweet. A cat sleeps on a windowsill with one eye half open, as if guarding the street from nothing in particular. A small shrine on the wall holds a wilted sprig of herbs. Someone placed it there for protection against illness, against accident, against the invisible threats that slip more easily into crowded places than thieves do. Illness is one of the port's quiet dangers. Not dramatic, usually. No alarms, no sudden collapses in the street. Just a cough that lasts longer than it should. A fever that doesn't quite break. A wound from a rope burn or a rusty nail that festers slowly. You catch glimpses of it in pale faces, in the stiff way someone favors one leg, in the occasional faded scar crossing a hand or cheek. But for now, in this moment, the city holds itself together. You move away from the worst of the smells, back toward the market, where the air is at least distracted by spices and baked things. Shouts rise from a nearby stall. A woman thrashes a fish with efficient motions, its silver body flashing in the light before finally stilling. She guts it with a practiced hand, tossing the innards into a bucket. The smell is sharp, metallic, undeniably alive, and just as undeniably not alive anymore. You watch for a moment, fascinated and faintly uneasy. Life and work and death are very close neighbors here. On the other side of the market, a small crowd gathers around a storyteller. He stands on an upturned crate, cloak thrown back dramatically, hands moving in wide gestures. His voice rises and falls, describing some distant sea creature or impossible storm or heroic captain who probably never existed quite as described. Children listen with full belief. Adults listen with half belief and half hunger for distraction, if not for truth. You notice the differences between his stories and the day around you. In his version, every storm has meaning. Every voyage has glory. Every danger is faced with a clean jaw and a clenched fist. In the version you've been walking through, storms are simply weather, voyages are work, and danger is something people avoid when they can and endure when they must. Still, you stay to listen. There is no harm in a little borrowed wonder, so long as you remember to give it back. The storyteller's eyes meet yours for a moment. He sees you watching, sees the salt stains on your cloak, the sun in your hair. He lifts his voice at the next turn of the tale, as if offering you a slightly better story than the one you know. You smile despite yourself. Eventually, the crowd thins. The storyteller climbs down, counts his coins with an expression that is more practical than poetic, and tucks them into a pouch. When he passes by, he nods at you, a fellow traveler between reality and imagination. Afternoon begins its slow descent. The heat eases its grip by a fraction. Shadows, which had shrunk almost to nothing at midday, now begin to reappear, lengthening along walls and under carts. The gulls grow more active again, sensing that the pleasant chaos of evening meals is approaching. You find yourself drawn back toward the water, as if a piece of you now expects to check in with the tide every few hours. The harbor feels different than it did in the morning. Earlier it was sharp, brisk, all edges and necessity. Now it's looser, like a shirt unbuttoned at the throat. Work continues, but with fewer new tasks and more finishing touches. Ropes are tightened and secured. Tools are put away. Crates are moved closer to warehouses, further from open edges. People move with the cautious relief of those nearing the end of their shift. A group of young dockhands sit on a crate, sharing a hunk of bread and a wedge of hard cheese. One of them has his shirt off, sweat drying on his skin in streaks. Another wraps his hand with a strip of cloth, wincing slightly. None of them look particularly heroic. All of them look very real. You sit nearby on a low bollard, watching the way the light turns their hair copper at the edges, the way their laughter rises and falls without quite breaking into full joy. Tired humor has its own texture. A small boat comes in, low in the water from its load of salted fish. As two rowers work in slow, even strokes, eyes half-lidded. The smell reaches you before the boat does. Briny, sour, harsh. You turn your head, not dramatically, just enough to catch a friendlier breeze instead. The rowers notice no one. They dock, unload, shout a perfunctory acknowledgement to a man on the quay, and then turn to the next task. Prestige and glamour rarely belong to those who do the heaviest lifting. You sense unease in subtle places. A narrow-eyed stranger standing just a bit too long near unattended crates. A pair of boys who move quicker than necessary through the crowd, as if ready to run. A woman who holds her purse a little tighter when certain men walk by. The city has rules, both written and unwritten, but rules are cloth, and people are very good at finding the loose threads. Still, the crime here is usually small. A loaf of bread filched, a coin lifted unnoticed, a bit of cloth swapped in a moment of distraction. The larger crimes, the ones with knives and debts and whispered threats, tend to happen further from the water, in corners where shadows gather even in daylight. Here, the worst danger is often simple carelessness. A misjudged step, a rope uncoiling at the wrong moment, a cask rolling where no one thought it would. People curse, shout, sometimes bleed, but mostly they learn. The harbor is a patient teacher with unforgiving methods. As the day leans toward evening, your thoughts grow slower, more reflective. You find once more the old pier at the edge of the harbor and walk to its end. The boards flex beneath you with the same tired complaint as yesterday. The water around the supports slaps gently, a soft, repetitive sound that suggests no urgency at all. You sit, your feet dangling above the tide. The sun lowers, turning the surfaces of ships and waves to bronze. Your cloak flutters lightly in the breeze. You rest your hands on the wood beside you and feel the grain under your fingers. Smooth in some places, splintered in others. The pier has seen uncounted boots, spills, tears, laughter. It holds them all in its fibers without commentary. You think of this city as people in some distant future might see it. A small dot on a map of long-ago trade routes. A note in a document. A background image in someone's mind when they think medieval harbor. Flat, simplified, decorative. But for you, it is not flat at all. It is the scratch of wool against your neck, the sour taste of cheap ale, the ache in your calves from walking uphill, the sharp cry of a gull stealing more than it deserves, the sticky warmth of a potato in your hand, the soft burn of smoke in your nose after an evening in a tavern. Romance paints over these details. Reality is made of them. None of them are grand, but together they form something more honest than a ballad. The sun slips lower, painting the water in deep oranges and darkened gold. Lanterns along the quay flicker to life in staggered succession. Their light breaks in the water, fragile and shimmering, like chains of tiny stars dropped into the harbor by mistake. Behind you, the city readies itself again for night, and you, sitting at the end of the pier, caught between sea and stone, between afternoon and evening, feel that soft, familiar heaviness in your chest again. The feeling that perhaps you could stay here longer than you ever planned, or leave in the next moment, carrying it with you like salt on your skin. Either way, the harbor will continue. Its tides, its work, its quiet, unremarkable miracles, and you, for now, are part of its rhythm, whether you meant to be or not. Evening settles into the city not like a visitor, but like a resident returning home. The light stretches itself thin across the harbor, gilding ropes and railings, brushing against the waves in long, trembling strokes. The sun sinks just enough to soften every outline. Ships blur against the horizon, gulls turn into flecks of drifting shadow, and the stone under your hands warms into a gentle, amber-tinted memory. You sit at the end of the pier until the gold fades into rose, then into a muted violet that seems to hush the world around you. With each change of the sky, the harbor's sounds adjust themselves. Voices lower, boots scuff more quietly. The slap of water grows rounder, deeper, less hurried. As if the sea itself has begun preparing for rest. You rise slowly. Your knees mutter their small complaints. The boards beneath you shift with the tired groan of old wood greeting the cooling air. A faint, resinous smell rises from the pier, sun-warmed tar and the faint sharpness of damp oak, mixing with the evening salt breeze drifting up from the sea. You walk inland again, as lanterns blink awake one by one. The first lamps are always the tavern lamps, tall, bold, slightly swaying in the persistent harbor wind. Their flames dance in wobbling circles behind imperfect glass, casting halos of gold across the stones. After them, the homes light their windows. Thin slivers of orange behind shutters, hints of movement inside, silhouettes leaning over bowls or mending tools or small conversations. You notice how different the streets look in this hour. In the day, they seem narrow because of crowds. In the evening, they seem narrow because the darkness presses in from above. Softly, not threatening, but intimate. You pass a pair of sailors leaning against a wall. One smokes a roll of dried herbs, its scent earthy and sweet. The other hums a tune you don't recognize. Slow, wistful, shaped by long voyages and too many nights like this. They nod to you, the nod of tired men acknowledging another tired soul. You turn toward the marketplace. It is closing now, but not abruptly. Stalls shutter themselves in slow, methodical motions. Crates crack shut. Cloths are folded with rhythmic flaps. Vendors sweep crumbs and peelings into tidy piles. The air is thick with the last exhalations of the day's aromas. Spices lingering on fingers, bread cooling on wooden boards, fish scents settling into the stones. A child circles the market one last time with hopeful eyes, searching for forgotten scraps. Their small hands gather a bruised apple, a crust of bread, a cluster of wilted greens. You watch the child tuck them into a little satchel with practiced efficiency, then disappear between stalls. A woman selling herbs extinguishes her lantern. The sudden absence of light makes the remaining lanterns seem brighter. Her hands smell strongly of thyme and rosemary as she knots her bundle for the night. You catch a trace of lavender on her cloak as she passes you on the way home. You drift through the square toward the upper street. Here, the heat of the day disperses more easily. A breeze travels down the hill, cool against your neck, carrying with it the faint sound of someone singing from an open window. The tune is soft and drifting, an old song that seems to sway with the air rather than anchor it. You climb the narrow steps that weave between houses. Each step feels slightly different. One smooth, one chipped, one slick, one warm, one cool. Your foot grows accustomed to their quirks. The houses on either side lean in above you until the sky becomes only a strip of violet fading into indigo. The air thickens with night smell, smoke from hearths, damp stone, salt drying on wood, the faint musk of wool cloaks hung by doorways. You pause when you hear a soft clatter behind you. A cat darts past, then another, both chasing something invisible. Perhaps each other, perhaps shadows, perhaps nothing but the joy of speed. Their tails flick. Their paws make no sound on the stone. You watch them vanish under a porch, their eyes glowing briefly in the lamplight. When you reach the top of the steps, the city lies below you like a patchwork of dim glows. Lanterns, torches, bits of moonlight caught on tiles. The harbor is a darker shape beyond that, its surface reflecting the sky in trembling streaks. The masts sway like reeds in the evening wind. You descend again toward the lower district. The taverns have opened their doors fully now, spilling noise and warmth into the streets. But even this noise is softened. It doesn't roar. It pulses. Laughter leaks through wooden walls like smoke. Mugs clink in warm, uneven rhythms. Someone sings off-key and no one corrects him. Someone else argues with gentle insistence about something trivial. A lone voice punctuates the din with a sharp hiccup. You pass one open doorway, catching a glimpse inside. The fire glows in the hearth, red-orange and slow. A woman wipes down a table, humming under her breath. A man snores where he has fallen asleep with his head resting on folded arms. A lantern swings overhead, casting slow, hypnotic shadows that move like thick brushstrokes across the ceiling beams. You keep walking. Night gathers more fully around the city now, settling into corners, stretching into alleys, tugging on the edges of your awareness. The stars appear above the rooftops, dim at first, then bolder. Tiny points of silver shimmering in a sky washed clean by sea winds. A soft fog begins to form near the waterfront again. Not as heavy as yesterday's, but enough to give the harbor a blurred, dreamlike edge. It coils around the posts and crates, drifts between boats, curls under the lanterns where light catches it in pale golden halos. You walk into it. The mist brushes your cheeks like cool breath. Your steps sound muted. The world feels gentler, quieter, layered with softness. A boat's outline becomes a ghost silhouette for a moment before clarity returns. Two men carrying nets nearly bump into you. One murmurs an apology. The other yawns. Their lantern swings beside them, illuminating tired hands, knotted rope, the modest pride of honest labor done without complaint. You walk farther along the inner quay. A woman is mending a sail by lantern light. Her fingers move swiftly, stitching through canvas with small, determined motions. The lantern makes her hair glow with a copper hue. She looks up at you briefly, nods, then returns to her task. Work does not end simply because the sun does. You admire her quiet endurance. You admire the endurance of everything here. A breath of wind carries the distant smell of roasting meat mixed with the metallic tang of the sea. Someone must have spilled wine on the tavern threshold, because you catch the faint aroma of sour grapes in the air. Somewhere unseen, a baby cries, briefly, sharply, then quiets as though soothed by familiar arms. You turn toward the old pier again, drawn to its solitude. The boards creak softly under your weight as you walk. The sound settles into the rhythm of the water beneath. You sit at the end of the pier, as you did last night, and feel the day uncurl from your shoulders. The night sky stretches overhead, deep and vast, a velvet backdrop cut by a few wandering clouds. The moon is half full, its light gentle, not overbearing. It paints the harbor in pale silver, smoothing the harshness from every surface. The water responds, glittering in small, scattered patterns. You lean forward, elbows on knees, and watch the slow, hypnotic movement. Each ripple catches the lantern's light, carrying it a few inches, then losing it. The breeze cools your skin where sweat still clings. You close your eyes and listen, the gentle lap of waves, the distant clink of metal on wood, the whisper of wind through rigging, the muffled laughter from a tavern, the sigh of a rope tightening. It all weaves together into something resembling a lullaby, soft, repetitive, imperfect, deeply human. You let your thoughts wander, drifting like small boats over still water. You think of all the people who lived here before this night, those who fished these waters before the current streets existed, those who built the first dock, those who died at sea, those who returned home, those who knew this exact creek in the pier hundreds of years ago. Their names are gone, their voices are forgotten, but the sounds they heard are nearly the same as the ones around you now. The smell of tar is the same. The taste of salt on your lips is the same. The tiredness in their bones likely felt just like yours. History is not just dates. It's repetition. You feel yourself becoming smaller in the best possible way. One set of footsteps among thousands. One breath in a long line of breaths taken beside this same stretch of sea. The grain of wood beneath your hand becomes familiar. The stars above you more comforting. The night deeper but softer. And still, the city does not sleep entirely. A lone lantern moves along the quay in the distance, a night watchman finishing his rounds. A boat rocks gently as someone adjusts a rope. A dog barks once, the sound clipped and then swallowed by mist. Your eyes grow heavier, not the heavy pull of exhaustion, but the gentle descent of contentment. Tied inside you, regular and predictable. You sit a little longer, letting the night carve itself into memory. Eventually, you rise. Your knees crack again, softly this time. The pier's boards bend beneath your shift in weight. You walk back slowly, taking care not to rush, letting every sound accompany you. The whisper of wind, the wooden thump of your steps, the quiet pulse of the harbor. When you reach the foot of the hill, the lanterns glow warmly up the narrow street leading to your lodging. A few windows remain lit, but most have surrendered to night. Your ascent is unhurried. The stones are cool now, almost damp, and they make faint scuffing sounds beneath your boots. The air thickens with the smell of hearth fire drifting from the upper levels of the city. Someone's stew cools in a pot. Someone's laundry flaps lazily on a balcony. Someone's whispered conversation ends with laughter. When you reach your doorway, your hand rests against the wood for a moment before you enter. Inside, the air is still warm. Your room holds the faint sense of the day clinging to your cloak. The mattress rustles familiarly as you sit. You remove your boots, stretch your toes, breathe deeply. Then you lie down. The straw rustles beneath you. The blanket folds around you like a familiar shadow. Moonlight spills across the floor in silver quiet. Outside, the harbor continues its endless breathing. Inside, your own breathing slows to match it. And the medieval port city once again gathers around you. Not as noise, not as labor, not as story, but as a soft, dark comfort humming beneath your drifting thoughts. And though sleep comes for you again, this day, its heat, its smells, its textures, its hums, settles gently into you, becoming part of the place where waking ends and dreaming begins. Night does not fall all at once. It seeps in quietly, through the cracks in shutters and under doors, through the gaps in roof tiles and along the edges of window frames. It gathers in corners first, then spreads slowly, as though it has time, as though it knows you'll meet it eventually whether you race toward it or not. You feel it even with your eyes closed. You lie on the straw mattress, blanket pulled up to your chest, listening to the city's breathing change. The sounds you heard on your way back, the laughter, the clinking of cups, the scrape of chairs, begin to soften, stretch, and drift. Voices grow lower. A few tavern songs attempt to become rowdy, but tire themselves out. A chair scrapes hard once, followed by muffled apologies. A door closes with unnecessary force, then another with exaggerated care. You are tired, but not the kind of tired that swallows you in one swallow. More the kind that folds its arms and waits. Your mind still hums, replaying images. Lanterns on water, the curve of the pier, the bent backs of workers, the glint of pottery, the sway of sails. Sleep stands nearby politely, but doesn't insist yet. You roll onto your side. The straw rustles, sharp and soft at the same time. One stalk pricks your skin through the sheet. You shift a little, finding a place where the pressure settles into something bearable. The room is dim, lit only by moonlight nudging through the small panes. The warped glass distorts the outside world into wavy silhouettes. Masts turned into crooked fingers, chimneys into leaning spires, rooftops into soft hills. The shadows of passing clouds smear faintly across the ceiling. You close your eyes again. At first, you listen to your heartbeat, that small, steady drum that insists you're still here, despite the centuries between you and this place. Then, slowly, another sound emerges from the background. The harbor. Even from up here, it reaches you. A faint, distant wash of sound, like fabric being shaken out very far away. The sea strikes the harbor wall in low, repetitive sighs. Ropes creak, wood taps lightly. Somewhere, a loose shutter bangs once, twice, then is caught by a sleepy hand and silenced. You let these sounds soothe the edges of your thoughts. You drift, not fully asleep, not fully awake. Somewhere in that in-between, you begin to wander again. You find yourself on the quay without remembering leaving the room. The stones are cool under your bare feet. The night is deeper now. The lanterns fewer, the fog thicker, the stars brighter. The harbor lies before you like a vast, ink-black bowl cradling ripples of silver light. You walk along the water. The ships tower above you, their masts cutting black lines into the sky. Sailcloth flaps occasionally in the wind, making quiet, lazy slaps against wooden beams. The ropes hum softly as they tighten and loosen by breath-sized increments. The hulls creak as though stretching stiff joints. You pass a ship where someone still works. A dim lantern sways at the stern. Under its light, a young sailor sits with his back against a coil of rope, writing something in a small, battered book. His lips move as he shapes the words silently. A letter, perhaps. A list. A memory. His brow furrows. Then he smiles at nothing in particular. You don't interrupt. Some moments belong more to themselves than to anyone watching. Across the quay, a warehouse door stands slightly ajar. Inside, by the faint glow of a shielded lamp, two figures move among stacked crates. Not suspicious, not hurried, just careful. One points, the other lifts. They whisper, counting, double-checking. A soft scrape echoes as a crate is shifted. Their lanternlight falls across a painted mark on the wood. A symbol, a seal, a silent promise that what is inside belongs to someone, somewhere, who might never see the work it took to keep it safe. The night has its own labor. The city doesn't simply stop because most people lie down. Bakers knead dough for the next dawn. Watchmen pace slow patterns across the streets, their staffs tapping lightly in steady rhythms. Fishermen untangle nets by feel. Midwives sit awake by the beds of women breathing through contractions. The sick mutter. The rats scurry. The cats patrol. You pass a small shrine at a corner where 3 streets meet. Someone has lit a candle there. Just one, its flame small but stubborn, cupped by the rough stone niche. The wax has dripped unevenly, forming pale rivers over the ledge. A sprig of dried herbs lies beside it, its scent faint but still clinging to the air. Sage, perhaps, or something like it. Protection, hope, habit. You pause. You rest your fingertips lightly on the cold stone, feeling its grain under your skin. For a moment, the city feels very old. Older than your worries, older than your life, older than many of its current residents. Older even than the stories people now tell about it. You think of all the nights this harbor has seen. Storm nights, when waves crashed against the walls with violent insistence. Empty nights, when disease or war or fear kept people behind closed doors. Celebration nights, when ships returned unexpectedly and wine spilled more freely than water. Ordinary nights, like this one, layered over each other so thickly that they blur into something like eternity. You walk on. The night air carries tiny details to you that daytime buries. The faint sweetness of wine soaking into old wood outside a tavern. The damp, metallic smell of nails and hinges cooling after a long day of use. A hint of rosemary and smoke from someone's late stew reheated over coals. The sour tang of yesterday's fish clinging to a crate that wasn't scrubbed quite well enough. None of it is pretty in the deliberate, painted sense. But it is real. You come to a narrow stairway descending between 2 buildings. The steps disappear into shadow below. Somehow that they lead back toward the water, to a part of the harbor you haven't walked yet. You descend. The stone is slick here with moisture, darkened by time and by whatever runs down from the upper streets when rain comes. Your hand slides along the wall, fingertips tracing grooves worn down by generations of palms seeking balance in this same place. At the bottom, you emerge near a low, secondary dock. Smaller boats are tied here, skiffs, rowboats, shallow craft with peeling paint and patched sides. The water is quieter in this tucked-away corner, ripples moving sluggishly against the posts. A lantern hangs from a crude wooden pole, its light dim and yellow, casting long shadows. A man sits at the edge of the dock, legs dangling above the water, smoking a thin roll of something that smells pungent and slightly bitter. He doesn't look at you, but his posture isn't closed. He exhales a long, slow plume of smoke that dissolves into the air. "You're out late," he says eventually, without turning. His voice is not suspicious, just observant. So are you, you answer, though perhaps not aloud. In dreams, or whatever this is, conversation doesn't always follow the rules. He chuckles softly. Work keeps some of us awake, he says. Others, it's worry. Others, sea air. You don't smell like work or worry, so maybe you're the sea air kind. You smile even if he can't see it. He taps Ash into the water. Don't fall in, he adds, almost as an afterthought. Cold this time of night. Unforgiving. You assure him you won't. He seems satisfied. The silence between you becomes companionable. After a while, you climb the stairs again. The city seems to fold and unfold around you as you walk. Alleys bending, streets widening, squares appearing like pockets opening in a coat. You pass a house where someone plays a stringed instrument very quietly, the notes trembling on the edge of audibility. You pass another where a couple argues in hoarse whispers, then falls silent. You pass a dog curled in a doorway, chest rising and falling steadily, paws twitching in a dream chase. The sky shifts. The deep black softens toward a deep, endless blue. The stars thin slightly. The moon glides lower, brushing the horizon. A faint difference touches the world's edges, as if it's thinking of morning but hasn't decided yet. You realize you are tired now, properly tired. Your thoughts grow less like boats and more like anchors, sinking gently toward the bottom of the mind. You walk back up the last slope to your lodging. The stairs creak as they did before. The latch feels familiar under your hand. The room opens around you like a yawn. The straw mattress awaits you, indifferent but available. You lie down, pulling the blanket over you, feeling the residual chill of the night still clinging to the fabric. You close your eyes. This time, sleep comes more quickly. It slips into you like tide into a sheltered cove, filling all the hollows and smoothing all the jagged edges. The sounds of the city shrink to a distant murmur. The smell of wool and wood and faint smoke wraps around you. Your muscles unwind one by one without asking your permission. The harbor continues outside. You continue inside. And something in between them, something hard to name, settles. You don't know how long you sleep. When you surface again, the world is pale and blurry at the edges. Light has returned, but it's still soft, like a voice speaking in the next room. The sounds of the city have not yet reached full volume. They hum under your awareness like a low chord, steady and bracing. You lie there in that in-between and think. Not about tasks, not about lists, not about duties. Just about what this place has shown you. You think of the stories you were given before you ever stepped into it. Tales of bold captains, glittering treasures, exotic goods, daring voyages, tavern songs, and storm-washed decks. A world of drama, risk, danger made glamorous by distance. Then you think of what you've actually felt. The scratch of straw, the weight of a wool blanket, the taste of porridge that is exactly good enough and no more, the ache in your legs after walking uphill, the way work sighs from people's shoulders near evening, the way laughter happens anyway, not because life is easy, but because it isn't. You think of how romance and reality are not enemies. They simply live on different floors of the same house. Romance looks at the harbor from a distance, from a hill, in the golden light of a sunset it chose carefully. It sees shapes and stories and metaphors. Reality stands on the quay at dawn with cold fingers and heavy crates. It smells the fish and the smoke and the unwashed wool, counts the coins, feels the splinter, patches the sail. Without romance, you'd never be curious enough to come here. Without reality, you'd never understand what here really means. You breathe in deeply, feeling your chest expand, your ribs pressing gently against the mattress. This isn't your century. These aren't your streets. The people you've watched don't know you. They will never know you. They carry burdens you will never fully grasp, and you carry worries they could never imagine. But you shared the same air for a while. You listened to the same sea. You walked on the same stone. You watched the same moon rippling in the same dark water. For a little while, in the quiet space between history and dream, you lived in a medieval port city, not as a hero in a ballad, not as a name in a ledger, but as a pair of tired eyes and listening ears. And that is a kind of belonging. You open your eyes. The ceiling beams greet you like old companions. A thin line of light brushes the floor. A gull cries outside, "Hi!" complaining, alive. Somewhere below, the landlord's door opens. A pot clinks against a stove. A child mumbles something unintelligible. The harbor is beginning another day. You could go down again. Follow the slope, smell the bread, feel the heat, taste the ale. Watch the new arrivals. Count the new crates. Listen to the same old stories told by new mouths. You could, but you don't have to. You've already walked its circle. Pre-dawn, morning, noon, afternoon, evening, night, deep night, and the first pale edge of the next morning. You felt its pulse all the way around. You close your eyes once more. Not to sleep this time, but to keep the place gently where it is. Tucked behind your ribs, like something quietly glowing. The medieval port city continues without you, but you carry its tides now. Its softness and its roughness. Its romance and its reality. And as your breath evens out again, hovering in that familiar, peaceful rhythm, it's hard to say which is lulling you more, the memory of the sea against the stone, or the knowledge that somewhere, even now, someone is tying a rope, lifting a crate, lighting a lantern, and beginning another ordinary, extraordinary day by the water. And you, from your own time and your own quiet room, are simply here, listening, letting sleep come, letting the harbor fade, but never quite disappear. Morning unfolds again, quietly, cautiously, as though it remembers how gently you needed the last one to arrive. You lie on your back, eyes half open, watching pale light gather on the ceiling beams. Pools there like melted silver, slow and patient. The room around you feels softer than before, as if the night left a thin blanket of stillness over everything it touched. The basin, the cloak on its peg, the crooked stool near the door. You breathe in. The air is cool and faintly sweet with early sunlight. Somewhere below, wooden bowls knock together. Someone clears their throat. A door opens and closes without hurry. Even the gulls sound less argumentative this morning, their cries stretching longer, rounder, as though they, too, are trying to ease you into wakefulness. You sit up slowly. Your muscles remember yesterday and the day before and the evening before that. They do not ache in complaint. They hum in recognition. The straw mattress shifts beneath you with a rustle like dry grass stirred by a warm breeze. Your feet touch the floorboards, cool, then warm as your skin settles onto them. You open the shutter. The harbor lies below, washed in gentle gold. Nothing dramatic, just morning stepping quietly into its responsibilities. Thin lines of mist cling to the edges of roofs, as if unsure whether to stay or wander off. A ship's shadow stretches long across the water, blurred by the tide's slow breathing. The smell of bread already drifts up the hill. Yeast, heat, a little smoke. You pull on your cloak, feeling the familiar weight of it, the soft scratch of wool against your neck. Your hands move almost on their own now, fastening the clasp, smoothing the edges, as though you've been doing this for years, not days. Downstairs, the landlord's wife gives you another simple breakfast. A piece of warm bread, a cup of watered ale, and half of a roasted onion that tastes sweeter than it looks. You eat slowly, letting each bite wake you a little more. Every swallow feels steadying. Outside, the day greets you with a light breeze. You descend the familiar slope, each stone step becoming a small reunion. The sounds of the harbor build gradually. First the soft splash of water, then the thump of crates, then voices rising in fragments that mingle and disperse. A woman sweeps her doorstep with long, unhurried strokes. She pauses to adjust the cloth over her hair, then glances at you with a quiet nod, as if she's seen you walk the street every morning of her life. A boy carries a basket of fish past you, the smell sharp but oddly clean at this hour. He wrinkles his nose at the weight, then breaks into a grin when a gull follows him hopefully. The harbor spreads out before you, fully awake. Ships rise and fall with the tide like creatures stretching after sleep. Ropes creak softly. Nets drip seawater that glitters in the sunlight before it darkens into the stone. Workers move slowly at first, warming their limbs, loosening yesterday's stiffness. You sit on the low wall at the water's edge. The stones are cool beneath your hands. A faint scent of damp moss rises from the cracks. The water slaps the wall in small rhythms, like someone tapping a drum with soft fingers. The tide is neither high nor low, caught in the middle, indecisive, unbothered. You inhale deeply. Salt, yes, but gentler now, like the memory of salt rather than the thing itself. There is the smell of warm bread drifting from the bakery, the faint sweetness of fresh apples from a nearby cart, the earthy scent of wooden crates stacked in the sun. A fisherman sits near you mending a net. His hands move slowly, methodically. He doesn't speak, but he hums. A small, wandering tune that coils around the quiet like smoke. You listen without intruding. His humming seems to mend something in the air as much as in the net. You wander again, past the rope walk, where men twist thick strands with focused brows. Past the spice seller, whose stall smells of pepper today, sharp and bright. Past the potter, who shapes clay with hands steady and sure. Past the water carrier, whose buckets slosh softly with each step. Nothing extraordinary happens, and yet everything feels important. In a quiet corner, you notice a pair of women repairing sails side by side. Their fingers move in perfect unison. Needle in, pull tight, smooth the cloth, repeat. They speak occasionally, but their conversation is gentle, drifting like the tide. One laughs softly, the other pats her arm. The sail lies across their knees like a patient creature. Nearby, a cat sleeps curled atop a coil of rope. Its fur rises and falls with slow breaths. A shadow passes over it, a gull gliding above, but the cat does not stir. It is secure in the warmth of the sun and the certainty that it belongs exactly where it is. You pause to watch the water. In the sunlight, it becomes a shifting patchwork of silver and green, streaked with tiny ripples. Small fish dart near the surface, their movements catching the light in brief flashes. You lean closer, feeling the cool exhale of the sea brush your face. A dock worker approaches, carrying a bucket. He nods at you. You nod back. No words needed. He dips the bucket into the water, lifts it, pours it over the deck of a small boat. The splash rings softly. He repeats the process without haste. His rhythm becomes another layer of sound in the harbor, a sound that matches the pace of the day. You wander toward the upper street again as the sun climbs. Shadows shorten. Heat gathers. The smell of tar rises from the ropes. A gull lands boldly at your feet, then hops away when it realizes you have no food. Children chase each other through the market, laughter trailing behind them like ribbons. But today is gentler than the last. The merchants argue, yes, but softly. The workers sweat, but without bitterness. Even the sea seems to sigh rather than crash. You feel the city turning itself toward afternoon with the ease of a boat guided by a familiar current. You find a shaded corner near a stack of barrels and sit. You listen, a woman laughing warm and low, a hammer tapping in a workshop nearby, the splash of a bucket pouring water, a distant call from a ship's deck, indistinct but confident. You close your eyes briefly, and the city continues around you, holding you in its slow cradle of sounds and smells and warmth. When you open your eyes, the sunlight has shifted. It is late afternoon now, though the hours feel melted into each other, soft-edged and indistinct. The shadows grow longer again. The heat reevaluates its priorities. Workers begin stacking tools, tightening ropes, preparing for evening. A man carries a loaf of bread under one arm, steam still escaping from its crust. A dog follows him with polite persistence. The man pretends not to notice. You smile without meaning to. You walk toward the pier once more. The boards creak in familiar tones. The breeze lifts your hair. The sea touches the beams beneath your feet with gentle insistence. Everything feels both repeated and new, like a melody you've heard before in another key. You sit. The sky shifts toward gold again, though a softer gold than yesterday, as though the sun is shy today. Light stretches across the harbor in bright, trembling streaks. The masts sway, their shadows long and thin. A sailor whistles a slow tune nearby, off-key but content. You watch. Nothing dramatic happens. A gull dives. A rope tightens. A boat moves slightly with the tide. Someone coughs. Someone sighs. Someone laughs too loudly, then apologizes. But you feel it. The way the city settles into its evening posture, shoulders relaxing, breath slowing. You think of how the port felt on your first morning. Sharp, bustling, bright. Now it feels like a world that has shared enough with you to trust you with its quieter truths. Romance still exists here, but now you know where it hides. In the soft edges of shadows, in the scratch of wool, in the murmur of tide beneath boards, in the smell of bread drifting between houses, in the lantern light trembling on dark waves. You stay on the pier until the sun lowers and the city begins to light itself again. Lantern by lantern, glow by glow, the water takes those lights gently, breaking them into soft, shimmering fragments. You rise. Your body feels light, as though the tide inside you has matched the tide outside. You walk back through the narrow streets. Children quiet down. Doors close softly. Cat slips into a doorway. A woman laughs from a balcony. Someone plays a quiet string tune, gentle as breath. Your lodging waits at the top of the hill. You climb the steps slowly. You open the door quietly. You sit on the edge of the bed and breathe deeply. The blanket is cool beneath your fingers. The room smells faintly of wood and the sea clinging to your cloak. The harbor murmurs below, softer now, as though speaking half to itself. You lie down. The mattress rustles beneath you. Your eyes grow heavy again. Your breath falls into rhythm with the settling city. And you feel it, the strange, tender weight of having lived a day, another day, and another, inside a place that existed long before you, and will go on long after. A harbor built of wood, stone, salt, labor, stories, and slow, patient time. A harbor that has let you into its rhythm. And as sleep begins to gather around you, soft as fog rising from the sea, you understand that you've carried a piece of it with you. Quiet, steady, still warm from the sun. You close your eyes. The city fades, but the tide stays. Always. Night returns for the last time. Not with ceremony, not with any grand gesture, but with the quiet assurance of something that has done this 1,000 times before and will do it 1,000 more. It slides into the streets like a soft ribbon of ink, settling into corners, smoothing the day's remaining edges. You lie on the straw mattress, half awake, half dreaming, drifting somewhere between the scent of the wool blanket and the faint murmur of the sea far below. You can't quite tell when the city outside stopped chattering and began humming instead, but it has. It hums like something living, something big and old, something that recognizes when you're listening. You shift slightly on the bed. The straw whispers against the linen. A cool draft slips over your cheek, bringing with it a trace of salt and the faint, warm sweetness of someone's late-night baking. The shutters creak a little as the breeze brushes them. The moon, thin as a sliver of bone, paints a pale streak across the floorboards. Just enough light to make the darkness seem intentional. You breathe in. The room smells of wood and faint smoke and the salt that seems permanently stitched into every fabric in this town. Your body feels heavy in a pleasant way, as though each limb is wrapped in the memory of everything you've seen. Ropes, boats, masts, faces, footsteps, tides. The medieval port exists now inside you, not just around you. But sleep does not quite claim you yet. Not before the city speaks one more time. You climb from the bed slowly, carefully, keeping your movements small so as not to disturb whatever fragile piece hangs in the air. Your cloak rests on its peg, still carrying the scent of wind and work and worn rope. You drape it over your shoulders, not for warmth, but for comfort, like slipping into a familiar conversation. You open the door. The stairwell is dim. A lantern downstairs flickers gently, casting uneven shadows up the walls. Your footfalls are soft as you descend, each step creaking like a memory being sifted through. The landlord's dog sleeps curled under a chair, its slow breaths rising and falling in time with the shifting lantern flame. Outside, the world feels newly washed. The sky is a deep velvet, dotted with stars that look brighter than they did before. The rooftops shine faintly where moonlight brushes them. The streets below stretch like quiet rivers carved from stone, carrying soft wind instead of water. You walk slowly. Every footstep feels intentional, as though the ground asked to be acknowledged. Even the air seems to move more carefully at this hour, drifting rather than blowing. You notice details you missed before. The way ivy curls around a window latch, the faint imprint of someone's palm on a wooden door, the carved initials on a barrel that someone surely meant to sand away but never did. The city you've walked through by day becomes a different creature in the deep night. Smaller, softer, more honest. As you descend toward the harbor, the sounds shift again. The clatter and commotion of earlier hours are long gone, replaced by subtle, rhythmic noises that drift across the water like thoughts half-formed. A loose rope tapping against a beam, a slow creak as a ship settles its weight, a whisper of reeds near the waterline, footsteps far away, one pair, unhurried, confident. You follow the path to the pier. The boards glow faintly under the moon, like faded parchment brushed with silver. When you step onto them, they respond with a soft sigh, as though recognizing you from the nights before. You walk to the end, where the sea feels closest and the land feels the quietest. You sit. The water beneath the boards moves in slow, liquid swells. Its surface catches the moonlight in broken ribbons, shimmering like scattered coins no one has claimed. A soft breeze lifts your hair, cool but not cold, carrying scents both familiar and new. Seaweed, salt, damp rope, a distant hint of smoke drifting from a tavern chimney. You listen. Nothing dramatic happens here. There are no storms, no shouts, no strange ships arriving with urgent messages. Just the night, long and patient, settling itself around you like a cloak. A lantern glows far down the quay, steady, methodical, belonging to a watchman making his final round. You hear his staff tap lightly against the stones, a sound that feels as steady as a heartbeat. He turns a corner and disappears, his light swallowed by an archway. A small boat drifts nearby, rocking lazily with the tide. Its oars are tied neatly along its sides. The wood shows marks of long use, scratches, dents, subtle grooves where hands have gripped it again and again. You imagine all the journeys it has made, short ones, long ones, necessary ones. An owl hoots somewhere inland. The sound floats outward, soft and hollow, barely touching the harbor before fading into the sky. You lean back on your hands. The pier's surface is cool, textured with salt and thyme. The grain of the wood presses gently into your palms. Feels grounding, anchoring, as though if you let your weight sink into it, the pier could absorb the last of your restless thoughts. The medieval port city looks impossibly calm now, and yet you know what lives beneath its stillness. You've seen the sweat and the work and the muted arguments. You've walked through the heat, the crowds, the long shadows. You've smelled the fish and tar and bread and damp wool. You've felt the splinter, the breeze, the uneven stones. You've watched people live, not perform, not pretend, just live. This is the truth that no ballad bothers to write down. Ports are not made of legends. They are made of labor, of repetition, of stubborn hope, of tired backs and strong hands, of laughter that manages to exist despite all odds, and of nights like this, when the world holds its breath long enough for someone like you to simply be. You close your eyes. The harbor continues in sound. Lap, 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 the whisper of rope sliding against wood, the faint breath of waves rolling under the pier, the distant hum of someone singing to themselves far away. It feels like listening to a story that will never end, not because it is long, but because it has no beginning or conclusion. It simply exists, like water against stone. You open your eyes again, slowly. The moon has shifted. Its reflection drifts to a new patch of water. The lanterns along the quay burn lower, their flames flickering. A fog begins to gather again. Just a suggestion, a thin veil rising from the sea without hurry. You rise from the pier, letting the boards creak beneath your weight. You walk through the quiet streets one last time. Small noises accompany you, a shutter clicking in the breeze, A cart settling into its wheels. A dog rearranging itself in sleep. A pot cooling on a hearth. The gentle snore of someone behind a half-open window. You reach the foot of the stairs leading to your lodging. Each step up feels softer than it did the day before, as though the stones now know your tread. You place your hand on the rail, worn smooth from years of use. Your fingers glide over it easily. Inside your room, the air is cool and still. The blanket waits. The mattress dips as you sit. The quiet gathers around you like a tide returning to shore. You take one more breath, slow, deep, and lie down. The city's sounds fade to a soft murmur beneath you. Familiar now, comforting. The scent of salt and wool and warm which settles around your shoulders like a second cloak. The shadows sway gently as the moonlight shifts, and you feel it, that subtle moment when the world releases you into sleep. When the harbor becomes distant but not forgotten. When your thoughts loosen their grip. When the tide inside you finally matches the quiet tide outside. You allow yourself to drift. Slowly, softly, easily. The medieval port city stays with you. Not as noise or work or spectacle, but as a quiet shape of memory you can rest inside. A place that repeats itself like a calm heartbeat. A place that asks nothing from you except to listen, to breathe, to exist gently. And as your mind slips beneath the surface of sleep, you feel gratitude for the long, slow journey you've taken through its streets, its markets, its piers, its nights. You settle deeper into the mattress. The tide continues, and you drift with it. Thank you for walking these long, quiet hours through this old harbor, for listening to its whispers, for noticing its shadows, for letting it lull your thoughts into stillness. Before sleep takes you completely, tell me if you wish,